Chapter 422. The burning sword chi swept across the ground. Those dying evil eyes were all turned to ashes. The last remaining evil eye shook its huge head. Its consciousness felt a strong sense of danger, and it instinctively turned around and burrowed in a certain direction. Follow, follow. The underground world was too complicated and the gnomes could not understand it at all. Although this place was not far from the entrance to the demon's sin, even Clark and the others did not know what was hidden there. After around 40 minutes, the evil eye entered another cave. It should be here. Before Chu Tian passed through the cave, he felt a wave of pure star energy. After passing through the cave, there was a large basin in front of him. The ground was filled with meteor grass and other plants. They were all at least level 3 meteor grass. This kind of quality not only needed tens of thousands of years to grow, it also needed a very good environment to grow. Chu Tian swung his sword to kill the unlucky evil eye leading the way. He immediately began to search this area. This place is... The others were a bit stunned when they came in. This terrain did not seem like it was naturally formed, rather it seemed like it was formed from the ancient era. In the rocks and on the ground there were all kinds of materials that released starlight everywhere. Star iron. Chu Tian found a piece of iron covered in starlight. This is a high-purity star iron ore. This thing is a high-level source energy array or the best material to make high-level airship. I never thought there would be this much here. If my guesses aren't wrong, this place was formed by a meteorite. There was also star silver and star gold here, which were all priceless materials. Ha ha ha, we've struck it rich this time. Chu Tian found a few more crystals and found that the entire basin was filled with glowing crystals. Star crystals. There are actually star crystals all over the ground. Dolores and the gnomes looked at him with a strange gaze. Of course they didn't know the value of these things. Star crystals were star crystals, also known as star stones. Chu Tian had picked them up in the Central State Trial Tower, and just a few small pieces were enough for a group of people to break through to the starlight immortal body. Right now, there were star stones everywhere. It was impossible to calculate the number of star stones in one piece. It was likely that several mountains would be piled up. This place was basically a star mine. Star metal was an excellent material, and star crystal was even more precious. Perhaps it would allow thousands or even tens of thousands of people to cultivate the starless body, and they would at least be able to cultivate the diamond body. The starlight immortal body was a non-attributed cultivation technique, and the starlight was a rare neutral energy, so even a member of the church like Dolores could cultivate it. Therefore, this mine was very valuable. With such a large number of star crystals, how many top-notch experts could they nurture? Central State's meteor grass basin was also created by a meteorite. However, the meteorite that created the basin had very little star crystal content. When it hit the ground, it had basically evaporated. It only relied on the residual energy to grow the meteor grass. This star crater was completely different. The meteorite shattered and buried a large number of star crystals in the ground, forming a mine. Since there are this many star crystals, perhaps there is that thing. Chu Tian's expression changed, and he suddenly became a bit excited. Quickly look for it, there might be a top-quality treasure here. Once this thing is dug out, I can guarantee that not only will we become rich, the entire Green City will become a great weapon in 2-3 years. It will be enough to become one of the most influential cities in the Forest of Chaos. How could there be this kind of thing? Dolores had a look of disbelief. Could it be that we can dig out a divine weapon? What does a divine weapon count for? Even if we were given a divine weapon, would we be able to use it? Chu Tian lost his rare calm as he anxiously said, "The meaning of this thing to us right now is not something even 10 divine weapons can compare to. Alright, don't waste words, quickly find this thing." What kind of treasure would have this much value? It couldn't even compare to 10 divine weapons? Clark gave a soft cough. You have to tell us, what kind of thing is it? Chu Tian did not even have time to explain before the ground in front of them suddenly exploded. The rock was shattered by some kind of power, and a majestic and vast energy charged out, quickly condensing into a form. Dolores cried out in shock, "What kind of monster is this?" The being that broke out of the rock was a 2-meter-tall giant. His body was covered in a strong electromagnetic halo, and he was completely bald. He was very strong, but he did not have any facial features. This was not a physical being, but rather an elemental life form. Star elemental. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. "Be careful, this fellow is very hard to deal with." Dolores threw out a bottle, and used the summoning technique of the demonic god priest. With a roar, the 6-armed ape was summoned. It was also in the form of energy, and under Dolores's control, it charged straight towards the star elemental. The 6-armed ape's 6 fists turned into a sky full of fist shadows, bombarding the star elemental's body. A shocking scene happened. When the fists hit the star elemental, it wasn't the star elemental that broke, but the 6-armed ape's fists. It was like a drop of water hitting steel. When the 6-armed ape attacked the star elemental, its 6 arms were shattered. The power that was reflected turned into a fierce current that instantly filled the entire space. The star elemental silently moved forward and slapped out with its palm. The 6-armed ape did not even have time to struggle, as its body was like water meeting high temperature, instantly disappearing without a trace. Dolores's expression turned very ugly. "This is bad. Its destructive might is at least in the 4th true spirit layer or even higher. We'll be done for if we're hit by it." Clark led the green religion priests to attack at the same time. Countless vines wrapped around the star elemental like a dumpling, but this kind of attack was still useless. The star elemental just shook its body, and the vines that could even wrap around a mammoth were all turned into fragments that scattered in all directions. Clark already knew this was bad. This monster's strength was much higher than they imagined. The star elemental raised its arm, and a storm of energy gathered in its palm. Clark quickly waved his hand and summoned a barrier that was covered in vines. "Quickly run." Could they run? When the star elemental arm swept out, a several dozen meter-long starlight blade instantly swept out and exploded Clark's defenses. The terrifying power directly blew several people away like pieces of paper. Almost everyone received a certain amount of damage. The star elemental's body turned into an electromagnetic beam, and with a few flickers, it directly rushed towards Clark. Although it didn't have any intelligence, it had instincts. It knew that Clark's cultivation was the highest, so he was the first target. This is bad. Clark's cultivation was not low, but he didn't have the strength to deal with this kind of fellow. The star elemental used its powerful energy to form a barrier around its body, and even a full-strength attack couldn't break it. The star elemental also had a terrifying destructive might. It was not something these people could block. Hong. The star elemental sent out a palm. Clark raised the wooden staff with both hands to block, and the terrifying energy formed a shockwave that instantly spread in all directions. The surrounding space shattered like there was an earthquake, and giant rocks kept falling down. Caw. Clark could clearly feel the staff in his hand cracking. He almost couldn't block it anymore, but the star elemental's power was still becoming stronger. Great Elder! The green religion priests quickly joined hands, and several giant logs drilled out of the ground. Each log was covered in inscriptions, and they quickly wrapped around the star elemental's body. A powerful sealing power suppressed the star elemental. Since it would cause a backlash if it was attacked directly, then they would use the sealing power to weaken it. But there was still no effect. The giant logs with the sealing power seemed like they were being burned by flames as they turned black. If this continued, the green religion priests wouldn't be able to hold on for long. There was no other way. If they didn't make a move, these fellows would all die. Chu Tian released a powerful aura, and a 9-eyed demon god appeared in the air. When Chu Tian raised the sword in his right hand, the nine-eyed demon god raised a jet-black demon god sword. This is... Dolores was completely shocked by this power. She only knew now that Chu Tian had hidden his strength. This power was actually this terrifying. Although he was only in the awakened soul realm, if he used his full strength, it was enough to instantly kill a low-level true spirit cultivator. Die! Chu Tian stabbed at the star elemental. The star elemental used its full strength to deal with Clark, but it was also sealed by the green religion priest. Chu Tian used his full strength to stab his sword into the star elemental's body. This kind of attack should have no effect on an elemental being, but Chu Tian had already used the power of his source spirit. The demon god's sword stabbed into the star elemental's body the moment Chu Tian stabbed out. The star elemental did not have a mouth and could not make a sound. However, everyone could clearly feel that there was an extremely mournful scream and wail reverberating in their minds. It was as if a detonator had been shoved into their brains, and it was enough to make everyone dizzy and knock their heads against each other. The star elemental's body quickly twisted. Like gas meeting an exhaust fan, the star elemental condensed into a body of starlight that was completely sucked into Chu Tian's body through the demon god's sword. It quickly filled Chu Tian's meridians, muscles, and bones. This vast star energy almost caused Chu Tian to explode. Whether it was Clark or Dolores, they all had a strange feeling. Chu Tian had turned into a black hole in an instant, swallowing the star elemental in one go. Swallowing effect? No, this strange ability seemed to be one of Chu Tian's many abilities. They could also feel various auras from Chu Tian's body, like his soul, his mind, his space, and his time. These people were all true spirit experts. They were all toppled at this moment. How was this possible? After Chu Tian swallowed the star elemental, he immediately fell to the ground. Every pore on his body released starlight, and he could only use his sword to support himself. Blood flowed from his nose and eyes. This was the side effect of his source spirit's backlash. Everyone did not even have time to let out a sigh of relief. There were suddenly several explosions coming from the distance. Clark's eyes almost popped out. There are still many star elemental. Dolores also saw that there wasn't just one star elemental here, there were many star elemental. There were a few that were very large and their auras were several times that of the previous one. Quickly run. Clark did not even think as he threw out a vine to wrap around Chu Tian, wanting to quickly escape. Wait a minute. Chu Tian pointed at the place where the star elemental had been killed. In the gradually fading light, a strange gem flew out. We have to take this eye of the star. Dolores charged forward to grab the gem, and they quickly left this area. Fortunately, the star elemental did not seem interested in chasing, otherwise with their lightning-fast speed, they would not be able to escape no matter how fast they were. Chapter 423. It could only be said that they were lucky this time. The star elementals did not have any intelligence, they only knew how to instinctively attack creatures that intruded into their territory. But when the intruders left, they did not chase after them, allowing them to leave the underground world alive. Otherwise, with the speed of the star elementals, even if they couldn't kill them all, they could at least kill half of them without a problem. Chu Tian did not have time to explain. His body was filled with a vast amount of star energy, and if he did not quickly refine this energy, perhaps his body would explode at any moment. When he returned to the surface, he quickly went to a secluded valley in Green City. He sat down on a giant rock and began to cultivate. Each pore released the aura of star energy and his body was covered in starlight energy, as if it could break out of his body at any moment. This situation was very dangerous, but it was a very good opportunity. The starlight energy was refined by the star elementals over countless years. The amount of energy he swallowed in an instant was not inferior to absorbing a ton of star crystals. Once this energy was refined, it would allow Chu Tian's starlight immortal body cultivation technique to go up another level. If he hadn't cultivated the starlight immortal body, Chu Tian's body would have been tempered by the power of the stars for a long time, so he would have a high tolerance for the power of the stars. If it wasn't for the fact that the power of the stars was pure energy without any attribute, it would be very gentle. Otherwise, if this energy was poured into his body, even if he didn't explode, he would still be half crippled. It had begun. Chu Tian began to circulate his cultivation technique. The star energy stopped rampaging through his body and began to evenly distribute throughout his body. It slowly seeped into his skin, muscles, and bones, almost completely fusing with his body. He began to refine it again and again. Chu Tian could clearly feel that his body was quickly being strengthened. Under the refinement of the power of the stars, each muscle was filled with endless vitality, becoming 10 times stronger than before. Finally, the elemental energy accumulated in his body was completely turned into the power of the starlight immortal body. Naturally, the effect was immediate. Chu Tian could clearly feel the cultivation technique in his body strengthening rapidly. The starlight condensed on the surface of Chu Tian's body was no longer as transparent as a diamond. Instead, it emitted a burst of light from the inside out. His entire body seemed to have become a man of light, so bright that it was somewhat dazzling. Under the powerful energy pressure, the rock he was sitting on immediately cracked inch by inch, almost being crushed into a pile of powder. Chu Tian understood. He had succeeded. This state was the sacred light body that had achieved great success. The starlight immortal body cultivation technique's 4 stages were the glass body, diamond body, sacred light body, and immortal body. The glass body was at the small success stage, the diamond body was at the proficient stage, the sacred light body was at the large success stage, and the immortal body was at the perfection stage. This meant that the cultivation technique had reached the perfection stage. Compared to the glass body, the diamond body not only greatly increased its defense, but its reflexes were also greatly enhanced. Compared to the diamond body, not only did the sacred light body's defense increase, the sacred light body's greatest effect was regeneration. Even if Chu Tian's internal organs were heavily injured, as long as he had spirit energy to activate the sacred light body, these injuries would quickly be healed. Other than that, the sacred light body also had high resistance against curses, corrosion, and demonization attack. Chu Tian's defense and battle strength had increased by a large amount. In other words, when the starlight immortal body was cultivated to the large success sacred light body state, it was no longer a pure defensive cultivation technique. Rather, it was a cultivation technique with strong healing abilities. Even if it was a fatal injury, it could still be healed. However, the biggest pleasant surprise was not the increase in his cultivation technique. With the increase in his cultivation technique, Chu Tian could clearly feel the bottleneck in his cultivation had loosened. This also meant that the opportunity had arrived and he could use it to attack the true spirit realm. How could he miss this good opportunity? Chu Tian quickly condensed his blood essence and began to charge towards a higher realm. Chu Tian had lived an extra life after all and had experienced this process before, so naturally he was familiar with it. He lifted it as if it was light and steadily attacked the bottleneck. After 3 days, there was a heaven-shattering sound that came from the mountain valley. The spiritual energy in the surrounding several miles gathered, and it was like an invisible mouth swallowing all the spiritual energy. Finally, everything became calm. Chu Tian slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes shined with a glow that was as sharp as an eagle's. He let out a long sigh, and like a sword or a bolt of lightning, he instantly shattered the giant boulder in front of him. Success. True Spirit Realm. The true spirit realm was different from the awakened soul realm. The awakened soul realm was just developing the source soul, while the true spirit realm was refining the spirit energy in the body into true spirit energy. When one reached the true spirit realm, their spirit energy would increase by a large amount with every increase in cultivation. Chu Tian had crossed an entire large realm, but there was no earth-shattering phenomenon. This was completely different from the past. It had to be known that around a year ago, when he broke through to the awakened soul realm in the Corpse Valley, it caused the entire world to tremble. Every time his cultivation increased several times, there would be shocking phenomena. This was a large realm leap, but it was no different from a normal cultivator. Why was this? This was the benefit of reaching the true spirit realm. Chu Tian was completely different from before. He had the ability to control his strength now. He could restrain his aura and prevent it from leaking out, so naturally he could suppress the phenomenon. The awakened soul realm was divided into the void soul, illustrious soul, and true soul realm. The true spirit realm was also divided into the early, middle, and late stages. The first to third layer was the earth spirit realm, the fourth to sixth layer was the heaven spirit realm, and the seventh to ninth layer was the spirit transformation realm. Chu Tian was an earth spirit cultivator in the first true spirit layer, but with the perfection realm, netherworld flame sword, and the large success realm, starlight immortal body. His strength was not something normal cultivators of the same level could imagine. But if they thought he only had these cards in his hand, they were completely wrong. The true spirit realm could be considered a dividing line. After Chu Tian reached the true spirit realm, he could now use the abilities that he found hard to use. For example, spatial energy. The starting point of spatial energy was the true spirit realm, and if it was used in source energy arrays, the lowest level spatial source energy array was a level 3 array. This was also why Chu Tian wanted to recruit Vivian. It was because Chu Tian could not open the space warehouse in the awakened soul realm. Now it was good. From today onwards, he would open a whole new world. Chu Tian could feel that there were still some star elemental energy that had not been refined into his body. These remnants were not energy, but rather several innate cultivation techniques. Chu Tian named them Starlight Secret Art. This was a close combat and movement cultivation technique that could be cultivated together with the Starlight Immortal Body. The two of them had the same origin. This could make up for the weakness of the Starlight Immortal Body in terms of speed and attack power. Although its value to Chu Tian was very limited, if it was passed on to Yingying, the young miss, and the others, it would greatly improve their battle strength. Even the young miss, who did not have an innate fighting source spirit, would have a decent battle strength. My harvest this time is too big. Chu Tian took out something from his chest. This was a stone similar to a star crystal, but it was different from a normal star crystal. This star crystal had a picture of an eye on it, releasing an ancient and mysterious aura. Eye of the star. A very precious material. The core of a large starlight meteorite. The core of the star elemental was this eye of the star. Chu Tian could even use this eye of the star in his hand to create another star elemental. If Chu Tian swallowed this eye of the star now, his starlight immortal body could reach the perfection realm. This sounded very tempting, but Chu Tian would not do this. Chu Tian understood that this precious material had an even more important use, which was to mark spatial coordinates. It could be used as the core of a space gate. This eye of the star was not big, it couldn't be used to create a large space gate, but it was enough to create a space transport array. The space transport array and the space warehouse were two different things. The space warehouse was just a locked space, using the space as a foundation to transport materials. A space could not contain life forms. The space transport array was different. This was an array that could transport life forms. In other words, if Chu Tian created a transport array in Green City, then he could create a transport array anywhere on the continent. Using the eye of the star to mark spatial coordinates, both sides could teleport. This was the value of the eye of the star. In this underground space, there seemed to be more than one eye of the star. If he could obtain a large amount of eyes of the star, Chu Tian could create transport arrays all over the continent. In the future, it would be very convenient to transport people, and this would have an immeasurable effect on Green City's development. Chu Tian took back the Eye of the Star. The Eye of the Star was the core of the transport array, but just the Eye of the Star was not enough. He still needed to find some precious spatial crystals. These spatial crystals were not as precious as the Eye of the Star, but as a rare spatial attributed material, it was not easy to collect them. However, the gnomes should have some in storage, so Chu Tian could borrow some to use. When Chu Tian walked out of the valley, Dolores immediately came forward to greet him. "You came out this quickly?" Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders. "Of course, who do you think I am? Where did Clark and the others go?" "The plague has suddenly broken out these past few days, infecting many gnomes in Green City. The gnomes have all gone to investigate." "Plague? You still don't know?" "Actually, there has been a plague in the forest, but most of the time it was in the southern forest. It has recently been spread to Green City. Come, let's go take a look." There was something wrong with Green City. The entire city was covered in an indescribably strange atmosphere. Before Chu Tian came to Green City, the plague had already broken out in the southern forest. There were several local armies that had been completely wiped out, and large areas of the forest had been contaminated by the plague. The situation was quite serious, but it was only in the forest. He didn't know what was going on, but the plague had broken out in Green City and infected 30–40,000 people in just a few days. The situation could be said to be very dangerous. This really was seeing a living ghost. Chu Tian had used the tax exemption policy to keep the merchants, but now he had to run away on a large scale. Dolores said, "Sir Clark suspects it was done by the undead religion, so I think he has already brought people to the undead religion to demand an explanation. However, Clark does not have any evidence, and even if he did, he would not be able to do anything to these necromancers." Chapter 424. The undead religion believed in the death god and the nether god. This was a very mysterious religious sect. The ancient sects of the 10,000 corpse ancient ruins were similar to the undead religion, the only difference was whether they had faith or not. No matter what, cultivators that dealt with ghosts and corpses were kept at a respectful distance by most people. When Green City was still flourishing in the past, the Lich had brought a large group of necromancers to Green City. They controlled tens of thousands of corpses, simply never getting tired of doing hard labor. They had contributed greatly to the gnomes building a city in the mountain range. It was because of this that the gnomes allowed the undead religion to build a temple to increase their followers. Who would have thought that after these years, the undead religion would become stronger and stronger, even faintly threatening the gnomes? Especially this plague outbreak, this was clearly the work of the undead religion. Clark led the gnomes to surround the undead religion temple. The necropolis was a gray castle with a pointed arch. Many gargoyles were squatting around the castle like statues. They looked like decorations, but in fact they were dangerous monsters of death. There were several circles of green protectors surrounding the castle at this time. Several thousand gnome elites were surrounding the entrance of the undead religion temple, currently confronting the necromancers. Both sides were ready to fight at any moment. Clark's face was filled with anger. "Samuel, do you really have to be enemies with Green City? Hey. The leader of the necromancers gave a cold laugh. "Clark, Green City is no longer the gnomes, you should be very clear on this point. Even if we are enemies with Green City, what does it have to do with you? Have that turtle-like city lord come out. I really want to see what kind of person he is, actually making you gnomes shamelessly send a city to bow down to him." This person's words were very harsh. Chu Tian's brows jumped up as he revealed a look of dissatisfaction. Dolores whispered in his ear in a serious voice, "Samuel, an important priest of the undead religion temple. His strength isn't bad, around the third true spirit layer. He should be in the top 5 of the necromancers here." "Then why isn't he a lich?" "Samuel was not a lich. He was a living person, but he was covered in bandages and wore a huge cloak. It was impossible to see his appearance, so it was impossible to distinguish his race. Do you think every necromancer is a lich? Dolores rolled her eyes in annoyance. The lich transformation is one of the top ceremonies of the undead religion. Only the most outstanding and powerful people have the qualifications to do it. However, even if they have the qualifications, their physiques might not be suitable for turning into a lich. In the entire Green Country undead religion, there is only the founder lich, and it's said that he is an old monster that has lived for over 2,000 years, even older than the old elves in the eternal forest. Is a lowly existence like the lich worthy of such reverence? Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain. Your way of thinking is hard to understand. Hey, what are you talking about? Who doesn't envy the liches? Dolores retorted. A lich is immortal. Immortality is something that many people yearn for even in their dreams. How many monarchs and emperors of the continent wish to become an immortal lich? I don't believe that you won't pursue immortality. The lich in people's hearts was a very mysterious existence. This kind of undead monster was transformed from a living being through a ceremony, so the lich in theory should exist forever. Your way of thinking is completely wrong. Chu Tian softly said, Don't think that the lich is that good. They don't breathe, they don't have a heartbeat, they don't have senses, they don't need to eat, and they don't need to reproduce. They are deprived of all the pleasures of life in exchange for an immortal body, so what meaning is there in that? They couldn't taste good food, they couldn't appreciate beauties, they couldn't enjoy the pleasures of men and women, and they couldn't appreciate the beauty of the world with their eyes. It was better to just die. You can't deny the benefits of being a lich. The lich is indeed almost immortal, but it is only almost and not truly immortal. What? Could it be that the lich can still die? The lich in theory have an unlimited lifespan. There are some strong lich that can even make a phylactery out of their soul. Even if their body is destroyed, they can still be reborn through the phylactery. However, the existence of the lich is not eternal. The lich can escape the aging and destruction of their bodies, but they cannot escape the aging of their souls. There were many living beings and non-living beings in this world that were said to be immortal, like the flower fairies that Chu Tian met. These beings did not have an upper limit in theory, but the flower fairies were more fragile than most beings. They were very dependent on their environment, and if their environment was destroyed, it was hard for the flower fairies to survive. A living being's body, spirit, and soul were all interdependent. Matter determined will, and will determined soul. Without matter, the will would gradually become dull and finally lose its humanity, even losing its sense of self. The soul would also wither away in this process. Once a living being became a lich, they had to use a secret technique to maintain their emotions, but this method could not be maintained forever. Most liches would become numb to their emotions after living for 2,000 years. Their will would become colder and colder, finally losing their humanity and self. Their instincts as a living being would weaken, and they would finally become undead. Chu Tian knew how to transform a lich, but he had no interest in this kind of monster at all. These words attracted the attention of the surrounding people, and even the people from the Necromancer Temple looked over. Acting City Lord! The acting City Lord is here. The gnomes discussed among themselves as they looked at the young human with strange gazes. Most of them were filled with doubt and distrust. Letting a human become the City Lord here was a hard thing for the gnomes to accept. The plague in Green City had been very serious recently, and this so-called acting City Lord had only appeared now. This was a bit unreasonable. I was wondering who it was that dared to talk about the great Lord Lich. Samuel looked over Chu Tian with eyes filled with ridicule and anger. Are the gnomes in a desperate situation? This kind of useless human can also become the City Lord? It wouldn't be strange for this city to be destroyed. Dolores immediately asked, This also means that you admit that everything was caused by the necromancers? You still don't understand? This is not important and not the main point. Samuel's eyes were filled with ridicule. Those tens of thousands of gnomes infected with the plague, they won't live past 2 days. This is the main point. You're going too far. The gnomes were enraged. This matter was 100% the work of the necromancers. Samuel definitely had a reason for being this arrogant. That damn lich had not appeared yet, so what use was there in killing these necromancer priests in front of them? The gnomes still could not solve the situation in front of them, not to mention that tens of thousands of their clansmen were infected. This was equal to tens of thousands of hostages in their hands. The gnomes could not ignore their clansmen, so they were bound to be threatened by these despicable necromancers. No matter what, they had to save their clansmen first. Clark couldn't help loudly asking, "What conditions do you have? Speak." If the gnomes want their clansmen to live, it's very simple. Give up the city lord position and let the great lich rule Green City, otherwise this small plague will just be the beginning. In your dreams, is the lich worthy of Green City? A waste human can be your city lord, but the noble and knowledgeable Sir Lich can't? Clark, please understand this, I'm not joking with you. Think about the tens of thousands of clansmen struggling in pain. I swear that other than us necromancers, no one has a way. Samuel pointed at Chu Tian. Of course, you have another choice. That is to kill this human and send his head to the eternal forest. Then you can rely on the Dragon's Ridge and be loyal to the Dragon's Ridge. Like this, you gnomes will still be the masters of this city. Not only will the undead religion not be enemies with your green religion, they will also become your strong allies. It was impossible for the lich to sit on the city lord's throne. It wasn't like the necromancer priests didn't know this. Samuel purposely made this request to pave the way for his second request. Kill Chu Tian. Cut off relations with the eternal forest. This was what the Dragon's Ridge wanted to see. The tens of thousands of gnomes' lives were in the hands of the necromancers, so it shouldn't be a hard choice to make. After all, the gnomes did not like humans, so why would they give up their clansmen's lives for a trivial human? You should know the stubborn nature of the eternal forest's people. Samuel added oil to the fire. I think the Elven King not sending people to take over Green City is not because he doesn't care about Green City, but rather because he has no other choice. The elves do not like to be embroiled in disputes, and your choice to rely on the eternal forest was wrong from the start. Now in front of you is a chance to correct your mistake. He pulled out the netherworld sword with a schwa sound. I think you've spoken a bit too much nonsense. Chu Tian raised his sword as he walked out. Do you want father to die that much? Then Uncle Chu Tian will give you a chance. I'm standing right here, so kill me if you have the skills. Samuel said with a cold smile. You want me to make a move? Chu Tian laughed. If it wasn't for you being too hateful, I wouldn't even bother dirtying my sword. A wave of anger surged out of Samuel's body. He extended a withered twig-like finger and chanted. Suddenly, a strong stench of rotting flesh filled the surroundings, and a dark green fireball quickly expanded at the tip of his finger. Overestimating yourself, human, I'll let you see the might of the baleful corpse flame. This green ball of flame filled with a strong corpse stench landed in front of Chu Tian's feet. That strong smell that could make people want to vomit instantly spread out in all directions, making everyone else involuntarily move back. Green flames soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not make any movements and was instantly submerged by the flames. Dolores was shocked. It can't be, that fellow actually couldn't resist at all? The gnomes were also stunned. Although they already knew that this acting city lord was not strong, they never thought he would be this weak. He didn't even have a chance to resist? Samuel said with a cold smile, truly a joke. Who would have thought that at this time, a figure would walk out of the sea of flames? The flames had completely swallowed his body, so no one could feel any energy fluctuations coming from Chu Tian's body. What was strange was that the flames passed through his body, but it did not cause any injuries. Not a single hair was touched, Not even a single corner of his body was touched. What is going on? Everyone in the crowd revealed looks of shock. Some people found a very strange phenomenon. Chu Tian's pitch-black eyes had turned white at this moment and his aura had completely disappeared. He was standing here on the surface, but no one could feel his existence. If the high-level members of Miracle Commerce were here, they would recognize that this cultivation technique was the void-escaping spatial movement technique that Chu Tian had taught Vivian. Now Chu Tian could use it himself. Chapter 425. Samuel's corpse flame was a strange flame. This flame was born from extreme yin energy and needed corpse energy to support it. Samuel had refined it over the years with several strong corpse poisons, allowing it to corrode a living being's body and vitality, turning a living person into a yin corpse. Although the power of the flame was nothing to write home about, the additional effect was enough to make people tremble with fear. Even a powerhouse with a higher cultivation than Samuel didn't dare to let himself be enveloped in this flame, let alone a person with a lower cultivation who didn't use any defensive techniques. Why was he not injured at all? Chu Tian was standing in the middle of the flame, not a single hair on his body had been touched. This was a bit unbelievable and incomprehensible. Samuel shot out several more fireballs. Shwa, shwa. Several fireballs hit Chu Tian's body. This time people could clearly see that the fireballs passed through Chu Tian's body, but strangely they did not touch Chu Tian. It was like they did not pass through his body, but rather a mass of air. Since they couldn't even touch him, what could these strange flames do to him? Diversionary technique? Spiritual illusion technique? No, he didn't feel any spiritual energy fluctuations. Samuel did not believe it. His body was covered in a ghostly aura as he raised his hands high up. His 10 skinny fingers released flames at the same time, condensing a large fireball above his head in a short period of time. This fireball was quickly compressed, turning from a dark green to a pitch-black color. The attack power was at least 10 times stronger than before. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. The reason he could easily deal with the previous attack was because the flame itself was too weak. This attack was close to Samuel's triple awakened soul's strength, and Chu Tian's void escaping technique did not have a way to deal with this kind of strong energy interference, so once he was hit, he would lose his effect. You think you can be arrogant just because you know a strange cultivation technique? Samuel caught Chu Tian's expression. He expected that Chu Tian would not be able to dodge this attack, so he revealed a cold fiendish smile. How will you block this move? Go die. The black fireball roared as it rushed over. Chu Tian didn't dodge. His skin, his body, suddenly lit up with starlight. The light was so intense that his whole body seemed to be made of light. He opened his arms as if he were hugging a friend, and very casually and naturally hugged her. He's courting death. How can Samuel's corpse fire be touched by a mortal's body? The necromancers revealed an expression like they were looking at a fool, and the gnomes revealed looks of shock. Could it be that the human didn't feel that the fatal part of the flame wasn't the flame itself, but rather the poison and curse inside? What was the difference between rushing forward recklessly like a moth flying into a flame? Poochie! The sound of water and fire colliding. The fireball in Chu Tian's arms continued to shrink. The sinister corpse chi and corpse poison energy could not penetrate the light on his body and cause any damage to Chu Tian at all. Instead, it was completely blocked out, and in the end it was completely annihilated by the power of the holy light. Everyone was shocked once again. He was still unscathed. How did this human do it? There weren't many people in Green City that could calmly block Samuel's attack. Actually, this was one of the effects of the sacred light body. Not only did the sacred light body have a strong defense, it also had a strong resistance to this kind of dark death energy. It could even be said that it completely countered it. Samuel finally understood. The people sent by the Eternal Forest were not ordinary people. This kind of defensive ability could make him an outstanding talent in Green City. If he wasn't careful in dealing with this kind of opponent, perhaps there would be endless troubles. Chu Tian raised his sword and turned into a burning sword chi that swept out. Samuel's cloak released a large amount of dark energy that was like several hundred wandering spirits surrounding him, immediately forming a layer of defense. Chu Tian's sword chi hit it, but it couldn't harm Samuel at all. "You're only SOSO." When Samuel's voice was halfway through, Chu Tian suddenly turned into an afterimage and disappeared. This speed was so fast that even Samuel, who was in the rank 3 true spirit, could not react to it. In an instant, more than 10 extremely fast sword lights passed through Samuel's body like threads. One after another beautiful sword lights shot out. The Een souls that were protecting his body were instantly scattered, and a large portion of them were evaporated by the netherworld flame's power. Samuel was completely enraged. "Great underworld god, please open the gates of hell and release the power of the dead into the world." A large amount of ink like black fog appeared around the necromancer priest. This spirit energy condensed into a fierce skeleton image. This was the necromancer's source spirit. When the incomparably strong death aura spread out, it was like a drop of ink on a piece of paper. Wherever it spread, it would be coated in a layer of black. The surrounding green grass became like obsidian, and then like fragile glass, it shattered inch by inch. Chu Tian hurriedly dodged this kind of attack, even he did not dare to take it head-on. The spirit energy aura released by his source spirit. There was no sign of life within 15 meters of Samuel. Countless strands of energy floated in the air, and with Samuel chanting an incantation, they all condensed back into a solid form. 10,000 ghosts seeking life. Samuel's spirit energy turned into thousands of skulls. There were strange cries coming from all directions, and there was a spiritual attack contained within. It made the gnomes' expressions change, and they all moved back to dodge. These skulls had fierce expressions and their hair was disheveled. Once they were summoned, they immediately locked onto Chu Tian. They were like sharks smelling blood as they all charged forward to suck his flesh dry. They were not illusions. Each skull was a weapon refined by the necromancer's vengeful spirits. They were monsters with form but no substance, so even if they were broken by normal methods, there would be no effect at all. They would reform in a few seconds, so it would be a waste of energy. Once the skull landed on a person, the consequences would be unimaginable. These vengeful spirits would enter the target's body and use the curse and death energy to corrode the body. Then it would corrode the mind and soul, finally draining the flesh and soul. This was a very high-level move of the necromancers. This move was not over yet. The second move was released. Samuel controlled the thick ghosts and black fog around him and quickly condensed them on the surface of his body, finally forming a set of sturdy and ferocious armor. Samuel's original appearance could no longer be seen. He had almost turned into a skeleton general with a height of nearly 3 meters and 2 black bone spears in his hand. His body was covered in runes. The 2 black bone spears were filled with a strong death aura. Every movement he made stirred up a storm of ghost. That bone-chilling current that could freeze a person's soul was enough to make it hard for people to breathe, not to mention moving or resisting. "I want to see what you will use to fight me." Samuel's voice became wild and terrifying. It was like several hundred hoarse voices overlapping together, making people feel a chill down their spines. "Then come." The black demon god soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not hide his strength anymore. He released his source spirit and a wild destructive energy filled the surroundings, instantly shattering all the skulls around him. This was not just shattering them, it was also a destructive attack from the root, making it impossible for them to regenerate. No matter how many skulls slammed into it, they were shattered by the demon god's sword 3 feet away. Chu Tian's figure paused, and the raging flames on the blades spread to his body. In an instant, they covered Chu Tian's entire body, making him look like a flaming demon. A skeleton general. A flame demon. Both sides charged at each other at the same time. Everyone could clearly feel that Chu Tian had fused with the weapon spirit and fused with the weapon, instantly increasing his strength by several times, completely overshadowing Samuel. A sword glow soared into the sky. But the two spears of death were cleanly cut into pieces. The sword beam still maintained its power and bombarded Samuel's body. The skeleton armor formed by ghosts and death energy completely exploded, and Samuel's body was thrown high into the air. One attack. Chu Tian only used one attack. Clean and direct, without any fancy moves, he used a single attack to crush Samuel. Chu Tian's figure flickered and his flame body split into 8, shooting out like meteors, evenly distributed in 8 directions around Samuel. The sword glows in each figure's hands became incomparably dazzling, condensing a terrifying strength. "No, you can't kill me!" Samuel struggled as he angrily roared, "Otherwise tens of thousands of people will be buried with you." Clark's expression also changed. He didn't have a way to save his clansmen yet, so if he killed this fellow now, it would be impossible to stop. He did not have a chance to stop him. Chu Tian's movements were too fast and the 8 figures moved at the same time, releasing the netherworld flickering flame slash. Each figure sent out at least 30 sword glows. The 8 figures sent out over 200 sword glows in half a blink of an eye. The entire field of vision was filled with a storm of blue sword glows. It was like a beautiful exploding flame, blooming in the sky. Under the cover of the sword glows, everyone's eyes opened wide. The momentum of this attack was very strong. In the center of this incomparable storm of sword chi, anything would be instantly turned to dust. Finally it would be swallowed by the wild netherworld flames, not even leaving a bit of residue. The sword glows disappeared as quickly as they appeared. It was like a flash in the pan, stunning people and making them feel pity. When the storm of sword glows disappeared from the sky, Chu Tian slowly fell to the ground and the flames slowly disappeared from his body. He spat out in disdain, "You want to kill me with this little bit of skill? I think the necromancer priest's methods are only SOSO. The entire scene was filled with a deathly silence. The gnomes were all stunned. Who said this human was weak? He was clearly strong enough to make people's hairs stand on end. A human that wasn't even 20 years old had the greatest potential. If he was given 30-50 years of time, how strong would he grow? You killed Samuel. The other necromancers reacted after a few seconds. Anger, shock, and fear filled their hearts at the same time. Not only did I kill him, I also want to kill you all. Chu Tian charged at the necromancers with a sword glowing behind him. One person with a sword charged at several hundred necromancers. Chapter 426. Even if Samuel was not a peak expert of the undead religion, he could still be considered a top expert in Green City. With the gnome's great elder Clark personally making a move, even if he could win against Samuel, he would still have to pay a bit of a price. The necromancer priests were ruthless and incomparably crafty, catching people off guard. No one dared to underestimate this group. But now? The acting city lord that everyone looked down on. This young human that was too young to be normal. He had actually directly killed Samuel. The entire fight was very short and he was at most in the first true spirit layer. In a situation where he crossed 2 levels without paying a price, he had almost killed the 3rd true spirit layer priest Samuel. This could not be described as a genius, this human surpassed common sense. He was a completely monstrous existence. The several thousand gnomes had seen the fight. The human sent by the Elven King was not trash. Although this kind of strength didn't count for much in the Eternal Forest, in terms of battle strength, he was at least in the top 10 in Green City. Not to mention that he was still this young, he might not be inferior to those old fellows in the Eternal Forest in the future. Schwa. Chu Tian did not stop. People still had not recovered from their shock. Chu Tian already charged forward with an endless might, turning into a sword glow that swept past several necromancers. Several bodies were cut apart by the sword glow without any resistance, and the netherworld flame swallowed their bodies. Kill! Kill him! The necromancer priests roared out in rage. Chu Tian's eyes turned white again and the space around him trembled. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared, moving to the center of the necromancers. Spatial movement? Damn! A giant sword glow swept out. Several dozen necromancers were sent flying like butterflies with their bodies burning in flames. These necromancer temple guards were all elites of the church, but Chu Tian had been cut down like vegetables. Several necromancy priests hurriedly chanted an incantation, and the motionless gargoyles that were squatting like statues on top of the shrine all came to life at this moment. They flapped their wings and suddenly rushed towards Chu Tian. The gargoyles were puppets refined by the necromancers. They were similar to the shaman's voodoo puppets and the Green Country's protectors. Each gargoyle was not inferior to a ninth awakened soul-layer demon beast, and they were covered in death arrays and curses. Even if they fought with opponents of the same level, they would still be at a disadvantage. 300 gargoyles were awakened, instantly forming a terrifying force. The 300 gargoyles spread their wings and a gray wave of light blasted out, covering a large area. Everything within the light was corroded by the powerful curse power and turned into gray stones. Petrification curse. This was a kind of curse power that could directly turn living beings into stone. Chu Tian was not affected at all as he quickly passed through the light wave. He swung his sword and cut down several necromancers. The other necromancers had already been pushed back, and they quickly made their move to resist. The graveyard around the shrine was dug open and zombies covered in stitches were awakened. It was like there were springs in their bodies as they shot out from the ground. These stitched-up puppets were all zombies transformed from corpses. Although their bodies were stiff and slow, they were filled with various poisons and curses. Each one had a shocking close-range attack power. Although they were not as agile and fierce as the gargoyles, there were over 1,000 of them. Chu Tian completely ignored the dense undead zombies in front of him. He raised his sword and cut a necromancer in half. These were cultivators that controlled death energy. These frightening undead monsters. He treated them like grass. There were several hundred necromancers and over 1,000 undead monsters, but they couldn't stop Chu Tian at all. Kill him! Quickly kill him! The gargoyles released a dark purple energy and 2 bolts of lightning shot out from both sides, roaring as they slammed into Chu Tian's body. In the end, the gargoyles did not hit Chu Tian, rather they passed through Chu Tian's body and hit each other. Pung! The 2 gargoyles exploded like cotton. The undead zombies spat out fireballs, wind blades, icicles, poison arrows, and poison darts. Chu Tian kept dodging, escaping from the concentrated attacks. The other attacks all passed through his body like they were hitting air, unable to cause any damage to Chu Tian. Chu Tian was using the void escaping technique while his body was covered in light. Even if the necromancers occasionally broke through the void escaping technique, with the sacred light body's defense, these curses, weakening, and corrosion attacks could not affect Chu Tian's body. The various energy attacks could not cause any damage to Chu Tian at all. Kill, advance, kill again, advance again. Chu Tian relied on a single sword to forcefully cut a path through, and then went back and forth to cut his way through. That aura was like a hot knife through butter. Several necromancers that were not weak were cut down by the sword, including 2 necromancer priests. The gargoyles destroyed several dozen zombies and cut down close to 100 zombies, but Chu Tian was not injured at all from start to finish. Not to mention the necromancers. The gnomes were all shocked. Was this fellow even human? They had never seen a person that could easily pass through the concentrated attacks. Not even a single hair was injured. Instead, the other side was completely defeated, unable to resist at all. A gnome hesitantly asked, "Great Elder, the necromancers have all been killed, perhaps our clansmen." "There is no way to change the situation now, we can only think of another way to solve it." Clark helplessly gave the order, "Make a move first and overturn the undead temple." Although he was not injured, he had consumed a lot of spirit energy. Chu Tian's attacks gradually weakened and the gnomes finally joined the battle at this time. A single Chu Tian had sent the necromancers into chaos, and now with the elves involved, they did not even have a chance to escape. They killed their way from the outside of the temple to the inside. Less than 40 of the several hundred necromancers were killed. They could only helplessly retreat into the temple and open a purple barrier, easing the situation a bit. "Didn't you mobs want me dead?" Chu Tian was a bit tired, but his eyes were still incomparably terrifying, making the necromancers tremble in fear. "Now you want to kill me, why aren't you hiding like a turtle?" The temple's barrier was very strong. Perhaps it could not be opened in a short amount of time. But it didn't matter now, it was impossible for these necromancers to escape. "Listen to me, I'll give you one last chance to live," Clark said in a deep voice. "Immediately tell us the method to save our clansmen, otherwise you will be turned to ashes along with the temple." "Ha ha ha!" A necromancer priest broke out in laughter. "Do you really think we'll tell you? Green City is doomed to be destroyed, the gnomes are doomed to die, and this place is doomed to become a death zone. We are just entering the embrace of the Nether God first, but you will suffer eternal torture in the abyss of pain and death." These fellows were actually this wild? "Stupid human, do you really think we've lost?" The necromancer priest turned around and looked at the tall altar behind him. "I'll let you experience what is called true death and fear." Chu Tian revealed a surprised expression. The death temple released a strange aura. A few altars and statues shattered at the same time, and a large amount of death aura sealed in them gushed out, forming a powerful death storm inside the temple. In the process of the energy storm, cracks appeared all over the shrine and it shook as if it would explode at any time. Clark's expression changed. "Such a strong death energy, do they want to explode? Quickly retreat." "No, we can't retreat, this is some kind of ceremony." Chu Tian shouted at Clark and the others, "Stop them." Too late. This ceremony was faster than Chu Tian imagined. The bodies of the dozens of surviving necromancers were shredded by the storm, and the scattered limbs of the zombies were also swept into the storm. Countless flesh fragments were brought to the center by the high-speed rotating storm, and finally pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle, unexpectedly forming an 8-meter-tall behemoth. "What is this thing?" The gnomes were stunned. This 8-meter-tall behemoth was formed by the compression of hundreds of corpses. Its huge head was formed by 8 or 9 heads squeezed together. Its shoulders, chest, and abdomen were all hideous and terrifying human faces. Its limbs and torso were all pieced together from minced meat. This was a monster formed from the resentment, hatred, and strength of several dozen necromancers, as well as the bodies of over 100 soldiers. It was like a giant mountain of flesh, standing in the darkness and releasing a terrifying aura. "Abomination?" Chu Tian's expression changed. The abomination was a very high-level undead monster. Resentment, hatred, slaughter, death, and all kinds of darkness gathered into one, this was the so-called abomination. This was a kind of undead monster that was not naturally formed. Because of the special nature of undead, when large amounts of undead monsters were gathered together, the energy in their bodies would naturally circulate and there would not be any signs of rejection. Therefore, for cultivators that used death energy, the abomination was a very good puppet. The abomination's strength was not certain, it mainly depended on the materials it was made from. Several normal corpses could make an abomination, but the abomination created like this was not that strong. Now there were several dozen necromancers and over 100 zombies that were not weak, forming an abomination. This was simply a disaster for Green City. This abomination not only gathered the power of these materials, it also knew how to use the magic of these people. It was not something easy to deal with. Clark. The abomination opened its mouth to speak. The several dozen mouths on its body opened their mouths at the same time. You have made a stupid choice. For this choice, you and your city will be buried in death. This voice was very heavy and it made people's hearts tremble when they heard it. What Clark was truly afraid of was not the abomination itself, but rather the person making this sound. That's right, this was not the abomination's will because the abomination did not have a will. Someone had used a long-distance method to control the abomination's body, and the abomination's body was being controlled by that fellow. There was no need to guess, he was 100% the Lich. The Lich was not in Green City, but he was relying on the abomination's body to communicate with these people. Chapter 427. The abomination had fused several dozen necromancers into its body, with around 10 of them being in the true spirit realm. To create this abomination, it had used up the power of the dead sealed in the undead temple, which was a large loss to the undead religion. But the more they paid, the more they could exchange for it. This abomination's strength had reached the 5th true spirit layer, which was already very strong and hard to resist. It had also fused with the Lich's thoughts. In other words, the one controlling the abomination's body and power was the Lich. When the abomination had a clear mind and consciousness, it could use various secret techniques and cultivation techniques, which increased the abomination's battle strength by several times. Dong, dong, dong. The abomination took incomparably heavy step. The gnomes felt like the ground was about to collapse, but the abomination's speed was very fast. Even if there was a mountain in front of it, it could still easily smash it to pieces. This majestic aura had a very strong impact on people's mind. Sealing array. Clark and the Green Religion priests made a move. The ground exploded and several dozen giant wooden stakes came out of the ground. Each stake had a sealing rune engraved on it, and when they connected together, it formed a source energy array. The abomination was sealed in the center of the source energy array. Countless strands of energy spread over the abomination's body, finally forming several green vines. One end was connected to the giant wooden stakes, and the other end was like an iron lock locking the abomination in the center of the source energy array. This array was very strong. Even the abomination could not easily break through it, so its body immediately stopped and it lost the ability to move. This was just the beginning. The other Green Religion priests also made their move. Countless vines continued to cover it, turning the abomination's giant body into a small mountain. The strength of the vine's frantic compression could even crush steel. The abomination's body was also constantly being compressed, but it wasn't crushed. This probably meant that the abomination was at least a bit tougher than steel, but almost everyone believed that no matter how strong the abomination was, it wouldn't be able to break free under this kind of restraint. Kill it! Quickly! No matter how strong the abomination was, it was still a single entity. The gnomes drew their bows and were about to shoot arrows. There was also a portion of gnomes that directly surrounded the abomination. At this time, they were wrapped in a giant ball that continuously released a gray-green poison mist. The speed at which it spread was very fast. In the blink of an eye, it had covered the entire body of the loathsome evil. This was the poison that was released from the loathsome evil's body. It made people unable to see it with their naked eyes. Clark revealed a shocked expression. What was going on? Could it be that it still had the strength to resist after being sealed? Chu Tian could feel a low chant coming from the loathsome evil's mouth. It was the sound of chanting a strange incantation, and there was an extremely powerful death energy brewing. It was too early. Don't go over. He quickly stopped the gnomes. Retreat. If people could see, the loathsome evil had already been coated with a layer of black death energy. This energy immediately spurted out from its body, and all the places that this energy spread to became the color of obsidian. Vines, wooden stakes, ground, flowers, plants, and even air molecules were all frozen, forming a large patch of tiny black crystals. This power was too strong and too fast. The gnome's sealing array suppressed the aura from spreading ahead of time, making it so the gnomes didn't have time to realize the danger. When they felt the giant black wave surging around them, most of them didn't have time to retreat and were instantly submerged. Within 150 meters of the loathsome, everything was gone. Several dozen giant wooden stakes turned into obsidian pillars and countless vines turned into fragile stone chains. The loathsome evil easily broke free, and several hundred gnomes that didn't have time to retreat were hit by the energy wave, instantly turning into black stone statues. Their actions of running for their lives and their shocked and confused expressions all froze on their faces. Too terrifying! What kind of powerful death curse attack was this? It was at least 10 times stronger than the one Samuel released. Clark was filled with rage, but at the same time he felt a trace of fear. Although they had several thousand people, the loathsome evil's strength far surpassed his imagination. If they kept fighting like this, most of them would die. Clark, I can feel your fear. The loathsome evil gave a cold and sinister voice. After Green Bishop Lonnie's death, a trivial priest like you can't stop Green City's decline. I'll let you see what true strength is today. Clark angrily roared. If the bishop was still alive, how could he allow a fellow like you to be so arrogant? The loathsome evil did not reply. Its body was covered in poison mist, and it released waves from inside out. Everything it passed through, as long as it was covered in the waves, it would be covered in a layer of black, turning it into a solid obsidian object. The gnomes did not dare block it. With the strength the loathsome evil was showing, perhaps no one in Green City dared to block it. Then, I'll send you to see your beloved bishop. The loathsome evil charged at Clark. Facing this wild energy, Clark's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He could already smell the strong aura of death. This is bad. He could not block this attack. Clark was clear that the Lich's strength was much stronger than the shaman high priest Mars. There were only 2 people in Green City that could deal with him in the past 100 years. One was the dying Bishop Lonnie, and the other was the druid prophet Yoda. The bishop was already dead. Yoda was not willing to make a move. The loathsome evil charged at him with killing intent, and no one could stop it. At this critical moment, Chu Tian pulled out his sword. His target was not the loathsome evil, but rather an altar in the undead temple. The loathsome evil felt Chu Tian's movement, and its killing intent increased by several times. With an angry roar, it let go of Clark and charged at Chu Tian. Too late. Chu Tian's sword shattered the altar. The loathsome evil's body that was charging forward began to tremble like it was convulsing. A low and calm voice came from its body. You can see through the source of my power? No matter how strong your divine sense or technique is, it is impossible to control a puppet from this far away. As long as the connection is cut off, how will you be able to cause trouble? Human, I have indeed underestimated you. The loathsome evil's large body suddenly inflated, but it's not over yet. The gnomes shouted in fear, this is bad, it wants to explode. When the Lich's control over the loathsome evil's body was forcefully stripped away, he actually activated the loathsome evil's self-destruction ability. The loathsome evil's energy was too strong, and if it exploded, the consequences would be unimaginable. You're not just looking down on me? Chu Tian's eyes released a green glow and his hands condensed a power. This was a life energy that was even purer than the green religion's energy. Finally it turned into a simple seal that slammed into the loathsome evil's body. Life and death. The 2 powers fiercely confronted each other. The wildly expanding death energy in the loathsome evil's body quickly slowed down. Chu Tian turned around and shouted, take advantage of this moment and leave this place. These gnomes were all experts of their race, and they instantly shot out like a rain of arrows. After around 5-6 seconds, with a large explosion sound, the Black Sea swallowed everything in a several thousand-meter radius. The ground and the air were all covered in a layer of obsidian-like matter. When Chu Tian took care of the loathsome evil, what he needed to do next was to solve the plague problem. The plague in Green City broke out without any warning, and around 40-50,000 people were affected. Most of them were gnomes and most of them were young children or adults with low cultivations. They were a relatively weak group. These infected people all had blue and black bodies, their limbs were weak and most of them were unconscious. This was clearly not a normal disease. Most of the gnomes' cultivations weren't bad, so it was hard for a normal disease to have this kind of effect in a short period of time. Chu Tian had not just saved Clark's life. He had also saved the lives of several thousand gnome elite. No matter how much prejudice Clark had against Chu Tian before, he was now completely convinced by Chu Tian. This human's ability and talent far surpassed his imagination. He indeed had the qualifications to become Green City's city lord. Perhaps he had the ability to solve the plague problem. What is going on with the plague? For so many people to be infected at the same time, there must be a source of infection. Clark had not completely recovered from the feeling of escaping death, but he was not a normal person, so he had already calmed down. We've checked the food and drinking water, but we haven't found any signs of infection. There is no direct evidence that it is contagious, but the number of people infected is still increasing. We haven't found the cause even now. Chu Tian did not say a word. He began to examine the patient. It was a little girl who looked less than a meter tall. At this moment, she was in a trance and had fallen into a coma. Her teeth were constantly grinding, making cracking sounds. Under her originally white and tender skin, the blue and black blood vessels could already be seen. Her body temperature was very high. Her heart was beating very fast. Chu Tian placed his hand on his forehead and carefully sensed the situation in his body. Chu Tian's initial thoughts were not wrong. This was not an infection caused by microorganisms, rather it was a kind of dark energy. After the dark energy seeped into the body of a living being, it would gradually affect and transform the living being. This was the so-called demonization reaction, but it was not completely demonization. Instead, it was following a set pattern like a curse, changing the biological form bit by bit. Chu Tian took out a talisman paper, quickly drew a talisman array, and lightly stuck it on the little girl's head. A grayish-black aura immediately spread out from her body. Clark saw this and hurriedly asked, "Can you find out what it is?" "This is the aura of a ghoul." Chu Tian made a judgment. "I estimate that in about 2 days, if the ability to purify the contaminated body cannot be purified, most of these infected people will turn into ghouls. This should be a long-planned conspiracy." Clark was shocked. What? Turn into ghouls? Ghouls were half-undead monsters, directly transformed from living beings. They had low intelligence, were easy to control, had great strength, and had a fierce temperament. Necromancers or cultivators with special cultivation techniques liked to make these things in large quantities. They were stronger than skeleton soldiers and normal zombies, suitable for hard labor, and also suitable as cannon fodder. Clark thought of the several tens of thousands of clansmen turning into ghouls and immediately felt an uncontrollable rage. These damn necromancers! Is there a way to cure her? "Sir Acting City Lord, you have to save my daughter." "Sir Acting City Lord, please save my big brother." "Sir Acting City Lord." The surrounding gnomes surrounded Chu Tian. Although the gnomes always looked down on humans, even Great Elder Clark couldn't find anything. In the end, it was easily found out by this human, which meant that this human had a bit of skill. "Everyone listen to me." The gnomes all calmed down. Chu Tian explained to everyone, "Contaminating so many people at once, the source of the contamination is not food or water. I suspect that the necromancers are arranging a large-scale array, wanting to pour a large amount of death energy into Green City. These weak people being infected early is just a sign. If my guesses aren't wrong, a large amount of energy has already filled the skies of Green City and can explode at any time. What? Could it be something else is going to happen? Chu Tian explained, the necromancers must want to contaminate Green City into a land of the dead, turning all the living beings here into undead, making all the plants here rot, and making the soil forever be covered in death energy. Like this, the eternal forest will not accept this land, and even the other powers will not accept this land. Green City will collapse on its own. Contaminating an entire forest city? Was this really possible? A forest city could not compare to a human's land. A forest city was so vast, so how strong of an energy was needed to contaminate it? Chu Tian did not know how the Lich did this, but it seemed like this was the only explanation. After Chu Tian went into closed-door cultivation, he felt that Green City was covered in a strange atmosphere. Now he could determine that this was a kind of energy and it was a controllable energy. There were not many changes to the plants in Green City, which meant that this energy was being controlled by humans, actively contaminating the weaker gnomes. Wanting to do this was not easy. First one had to have a strong source of energy, and then one had to have high skills. This Lich was not simple, he had some skills. It was no wonder. After all, he had lived for 2,000 years. For a fellow to live for 2,000 years, his wisdom and knowledge was not something normal beings could compare to. Don't worry, I'll heal the infected as soon as possible. However, this won't solve the root of the problem. Our top priority now is to find the mastermind. Only by killing that damned Lich can we completely solve the problem. There was still hope? The gnomes excitedly cheered. This was the first time they realized that humans were not as bad as they imagined. At least this acting city lord was very capable. As for those damn necromancers, they were even more hateful than the shamans. They had to be completely exterminated. Chapter 428. Because they were discovered in time, the gnomes could still be saved. However, because there were too many of them, it would be very troublesome to save them. They had to collect materials and refine the medicine. Who could guarantee that Green City wouldn't become worse during this process? There was no time at all. Chu Tian thought of the little fox. It could directly absorb the death energy in the flesh, so saving these people shouldn't be a problem. This would save him quite a bit of trouble, not to mention that he was about to fight the undead religion. The little fox was a very important secret weapon, so naturally he had to bring it with him. Even though this guy looked inconspicuous, it was actually the nemesis of these undead monsters. It had been bred in the fox-faced corpse king's body for tens of thousands of years. It was born with the most mean and evil nature, but it could restrain evil spirit. Even if it was a 1,000-year corpse monster from the 10,000 corpse ancient tomb, the little fox could directly suck its soul flame dry, causing it to wither to death. A 1,000-year corpse monster was not weaker than a true spirit realm expert under normal circumstances. The little fox already had the ability to restrain a 1,000-year corpse monster when it was born, and now that it had grown several times, its strength should be even stronger. With the little fox's help, their chances of victory were greatly increased. Not long later, Dolores brought the little fox back. The Fox clan's high priest had sent over 200 elite summoners with her. These were the followers of the demonic god religion that served the demonic god. The little fox could be considered unparalleled right now. The Fox clan treated it like a divine god, having large amounts of fox people protecting it every day. This lineup was even more exaggerated than Chu Tian's. We respectfully greet your majesty, the demonic god. Several hundred Fox clan members were kneeling on the ground. Dolores was holding the little fox, like a saintess holding a holy object. She passed through the countless devout believers, and there were several Fox clan beauties that were also 1 in 100 following her. Clark and the other green religion priests all stared at each other. This little fox is the so-called demonic god? According to what Chu Tian said to them, this fox is just a pet he raised. Although the demonic god religion were locals, their strength wasn't bad. Now they were raising Chu Tian as a pet to worship as a divine god. This was a bit unbelievable. Great Elder, does this little fox really have this kind of ability? Yeah, we didn't sense any energy fluctuations from it. This kind of matter was hard to believe no matter who it was. Chu Tian had already left and they couldn't ask what he did. They saw the demonic god religion's summoners send the little fox over in a very exaggerated manner. The fox girl lifted the little fox high up and the little fox lazily stood up. Like a lion that had just woken up, it opened its paw and shook the snow-white fur on its body as it lazily looked at these people. Finally its eyes fell onto the rows of patients on the stretchers, and it suddenly sucked in its stomach as it took in a deep breath. The gnomes were dumbfounded. The little fox's movements caused the energy in the entire valley to change. It was like what was breathing was not a palm-sized fox, but rather an ancient giant whale. The bodies of the thousands of patients twitched slightly. Strands of weak black energy seeped out of their pores and gathered in the air, forming a huge sphere. The sphere looked like a burning black flame, and the black smoke-like energy kept surging up like fuel. The smaller the black sphere, the more vigorous it became. Great Elder, quickly look. The little fox sucked out the energy from the patients, and the unconscious gnomes all regained consciousness. Their faces slowly turned rosy. It's effective, it's really effective. This fox is too mysterious. Most of these gnomes were children. When the gnomes' families saw this, they were filled with tears of gratitude and almost wanted to kneel down to the little fox. Dolores muttered, "This is the Lord Demonic God's power? The Lord Demonic God is only an infant." The Fox clan members were very excited. This infant demonic god would definitely become an existence not inferior to a demon god in the future. The little fox used more than half an hour to finally extract all the energy from the patient's body. Now the black fireball in the sky was as heavy as a piece of lead. If it fell down, perhaps it would create a large hole in this area and the death energy would be able to kill all living beings within several hundred meters. Under this kind of strong energy pollution, how could a person not be affected? The little fox opened its mouth and turned it into a stream that flowed into the little fox's stomach. It made the little fox's stomach bulge up, but when it gently patted its round stomach, it quickly shriveled up again. The little fox raised a claw and waved it. "Yes, Your Majesty the demonic god." Dolores respectfully cupped her hands and walked to the front to say, "Our Majesty the demonic god has said that these people are fine. Send them down and replace them with the next bat." The valley instantly fell into an uproar. Countless gnomes shed tears of gratitude. The little fox had not only saved these children, it had also saved the entire Green City gnome race. The little fox wagged its tail in a very happy manner, enjoying the feeling of being worshipped by others. Its master was truly useless, actually calling this fox for such a small matter. One batch after another, the little fox healed them all. But during this process there were more people being polluted in Green City, and the little fox did not have time to cure them one by one. These newly infected people still had about a week of safety. As long as they could eliminate the culprit in time, then everything would fall apart on its own. In the city lord's castle, the little fox was sent to the discussion hall like a moon surrounded by stars. Chu Tian sat in the highest position in the discussion hall, Clark sat on the left, Dolores held the little fox, sitting on the right, and the others were standing in the 2 rows below. The little fox had displayed its might to save tens of thousands of people, so now the Fox clan worshipped it even more. Even the gnomes regarded it as a savior. The little fox had only shown a bit of its skills in Green City, but it was already more worshipped than the acting city lord. "Fox, I haven't seen you in a few days. It seems like you've become a bit fatter. Chu Tian narrowed his eyes as he looked at this fellow. I think the fox clan has suffered a lot from being eaten by you. The little fox did not have any manners as it spat on the ground, and then raised its middle finger at Chu Tian. To be more accurate, it raised its middle claw. This fox is now the Lord Fei god that tens of thousands of people look up to. Accepting their offerings is already showing them respect, so what do you know? How nerve-wracking. This fox was becoming more and more arrogant. Now even Chu Tian couldn't control it. Don't waste time, it's time for you to work. Chu Tian stared at it. The Lich's location must be in the southern forest, find it for me. When the plague broke out, we sent out scouts to investigate, but we couldn't find any clues at all. Clark was a bit hesitant. Are you sure you can find it? Was this matter that hard? The little fox took out the divine eye and infused it with divine sense, beginning to observe. Chu Tian's eyes gradually turned a pale gold, which was the color of his divine sense. He established a spiritual connection with the little fox, so whatever the little fox saw, Chu Tian could also see. The large forest to the south of Green City had withered and the thousands of year-old trees had all died in a single night. There were large amounts of demon beast and native corpses everywhere. They had all been contaminated by some kind of energy and were currently transforming into undead creatures. Before long, these creatures would become an undead army. This kind of contamination was not something that could be completed in a single day. The necromancers had been planning this plan for a long time. Slow down, it's right here. Chu Tian suddenly called out. This basin has a barrier, so it's most likely inside. Fox, go in and take a look. Chu Tian locked onto a basin. Because he could feel the aura of the barrier, Chu Tian knew that there was something strange about this place. Although the scene was blocked, the dense death energy coming from inside could not fool Chu Tian and the little fox. The little fox activated the divine eye in its hand and allowed its vision to penetrate into the barrier. Large amounts of gray buildings appeared in its field of view. There were altars arranged in a certain pattern on the ground, connecting together to form a large array. There were several hundred gray-robed masked warlocks currently jumping around on the altars casting technique. These altars seemed to be built on some kind of ruins. This could explain the source of this powerful energy. The Lich must have borrowed the energy from the ruins to attack Green City, which was why it had such a powerful effect. We've already found the Lich's lair. A sharp glow flashed in Chu Tian's eyes. But looking at their appearance, this ceremony has already reached its end. In just a few days, the entire Green City will be filled with this death energy, turning it into an eternal land of decay. The surrounding areas will not be spared either, so we don't have much time left. Everyone's expressions were not good. Who would have thought that the situation would be this serious? The shaman sorcerers only wanted to destroy Green City, but the necromancers were even more ruthless. They wanted to pollute the entire area and exterminate all life, turning this land into an undead territory that only the undead could live in. The entire Green City was facing a life and death situation. The so-called no eggs can remain intact when the nest is overturned. Not only did they need the gnome army, they also needed the help of the local powers. It would be best if they called Luz's group over, giving the shamans a chance to atone for their crimes. What was in that basin? Chu Tian felt that the source of the death energy was a very ancient ruin. The Lich had used the ruins to build the barrier and released the death energy from the ruins into Green City. This ruin was not simple. In terms of the intensity of the death energy, it was not weaker than the 10,000 corpse ancient tomb. It was several times denser, otherwise it would not have been able to destroy the large Green City. Chu Tian's communication device rang. Hey Vivian, why is it you? He picked it up. I'm very busy right now, I'll contact you later. Big brother Chu Tian, wait a minute. Vivian's voice came from the communication device. Elder sister Qingwu said that the corpses in the barrels have been refined. Oldman's small town doesn't need them now, and you don't have any helpers in Green City, so we're prepared to send the corpses to you in the space warehouse. You have to remember to receive them." "What?" Chu Tian was a bit surprised, but he said in a satisfied voice, Good, I'm lacking fighters." Chapter 429. There was a gray tower-like structure with a strange conical altar in the center. It was pointed at the bottom and round at the top, just like a several dozen meter long awl inserted into the ground. It was made of dark crystal, and there were countless runes drawn on it. There was a gray-robed necromancer priest sitting on top of the altar with his arms open, silently chanting an incantation. The source energy array on the altar released a dark red glow, and a thick energy was being drawn out from the ground like water. It was spread out through the awl-like structure, and was finally stored in the Towers of Death. As more and more energy was accumulated in the towers, some of it leaked out and collided with each other, creating black lightning. Several hundred Towers of Death gathered a terrifying amount of energy. The necromancer priest slowly put down his hands. His hands were completely withered like tree branches, and the face under the cloak was also a completely withered face. There was only a layer of lifeless dark purple skin sticking to his bones, and there were blue-purple undead flames coming from his eyes. Without a doubt, it was not a living being, rather it was a lich. The lich's withered face did not have any expression, and in fact it could not make any expressions. It was very difficult for a lich to have any emotions. He had even forgotten the feelings of joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. Even for a normal being, 2,000 years was enough to make them old and tired, not to mention a lich that did not have any sense of touch, smell, sight, or hearing, or any desires. He had long forgotten what it felt like to be a living being. From the moment he turned into a lich, he was destined to lose the instincts a living being should have. What he was doing now was just a method that was engraved in the depths of his soul, allowing him to avoid harm. He was like a machine that followed this order. As for success or failure, it did not matter to him at all. A lich that had lived for 2,000 years had already lost all traces of life. It was destined to only have one thought left. The lich's floating body coincided with the moon, and an incomparably complicated incantation came from his mouth. The surrounding Towers of Death began to tremble, and with a thunderous sound, the 100 Towers of Death released energy at the same time. It was like a volcano releasing death energy into the sky, finally forming a dark cloud that covered the sky. "Sir, the energy in this relic is too powerful. It's practically inexhaustible," a necromancer priest said to the lich in a low voice. "As long as we accumulate a certain amount and bombard Green City in one go, those stupid gnomes will instantly die. At that time, Green City will be your territory and no one will be able to contend with us. We can use this power to mass-produce undead, and we will definitely become the overlord of this area. That human will come." The lich opened its mouth to speak. More accurately, it did not open its mouth because the lich's human organs were no longer useful. Naturally, it could not use its vocal cords to communicate. The lich used its spirit energy to create vibrations in the air around it, creating an effect similar to speaking. This required a very high level of spirit energy control. Ordinary cultivators might not be able to master it even after studying for decades. But for the lich that had an infinite lifespan, problems that could be solved with time were not a problem. His voice did not sound like it came from a living creature. It was like the dry noise of machinery rubbing against each other. It was sharp, unpleasant, and lifeless. The necromancer priest said with disdain, "He's just a human, why do you care about him? Not to mention that we have obtained the power of the ruins, they will die if they charge in." The lich did not explain, but he was clear in his heart that this human was not simple. He had lived for over 2,000 years, so he still had this bit of judgment. Everyone set off and blocked the Green City army. "In another 48 hours, the ceremony will be completed. I do not want to be interrupted. Yes. The Lich was the absolute authority in the necromancer priest's mind, therefore no one would resist or question the Lich's orders. At dawn, on the central plains of Green City, 100,000 soldiers had already gathered. The gnome Great Elder and Green City High Priest Clark, the demonic god priest Dolores, the Minotaur Arnold, the shaman priest Luz, and several local chiefs had all gathered. Because of the urgency of the situation, there were no more troops gathered. This world did not care about quantity, but quality. If the central forest of Chaos Army was dragged to southern Xia, the battle strength of 100,000 people was enough to destroy the southern Summer Imperial Region's army. We are already prepared. We ask the High Priest to command. The atmosphere was very heavy. Everyone had already realized that the outcome of this battle was not just related to a single city, it would also affect several hundred miles of the forest, even affecting the lives and deaths of their clansmen. Chu Tian was an outsider after all, so he did not understand the terrain of the forest or the troop. Therefore, Clark had to command this battle. Clark looked left and right with knitted brows. Where's the acting city lord? Why isn't he here yet? He's here, he's here. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Tian brought 18 silent figures over. I found helpers and accidentally came late, I'm truly sorry. Everyone was a bit stunned. Wasn't this brat alone? Where did these 18 fellows come from? Although they had never seen these 18 people before, when they stood beside Chu Tian, there was a strong mountain-like pressure. The divine blood in corpses had been tempered by the divine blood for a long time, so naturally they had been reborn. From the skin to the bones, from the flesh to the marrow, they had all been tempered. Not only did they have the defensive power of a peak defensive cultivation technique, they also had the indestructible property of a spiritual god. The divine blood in corpses no longer had any weaknesses. Whether it was the normal elemental energies of water, fire, wind, or earth, or the lightning that undead monsters feared the most, the divine blood in corpses had a strong resistance to them. Even if they were cut in half with a single attack or their heads were blown to pieces, these attacks that could be considered fatal to living beings or even undead creatures would find it hard to kill them. The undead aura on the divine blood in corpses had been completely washed away. That trace of spiritual god's power was enough to intimidate normal living beings. This was not a difference in strength, but rather the pressure of a high-level life form on a low-level life form. It was like an elephant looking at an ant. Second true spirit layer. It was around the second true spirit layer. Clark's pupils slightly shrank. Even in Green City, it was very difficult to find 18 people in the second true spirit layer to be guard. Not to mention the fact that these 18 divine blood in corpses were like 18 statues of God. Even people with deep strength like Clark could not help but feel a sense of danger. These were not normal experts. Everyone, don't be surprised. These 18 fellows aren't people, they are just puppets I made when I was bored. Chu Tian had an uncaring expression. It was like the divine blood in corpses were made from a bored person's urine and mud. The situation was urgent this time, so I brought them over. I think they'll be of a bit of help. The divine blood in corpses were still in corpses in the end, they could not produce life. Therefore, in corpses, especially those refined into puppets, had no life force, no ability to think, and even their souls had been refined. Therefore, they could be transported in the space warehouse like goods. Alright, there's no time to lose. Let's immediately set off. Clark did not have time to ask. We'll split into 4 groups and each group will have 10 small groups. We'll attack along the following routes. Clark began to closely arrange everything. 100,000 people was a very large number. This kind of large army could not be spread out in the forest at once, so they could only split into different groups to attack at the same time. When the sun rises, the undead will be weakened to a certain degree. We'll send these fellows back to the embrace of the Nether God. Alright. Kill. Kill. Everyone's morale was high. This battle was not only important to Green City, it was also very important to Chu Tian. Chu Tian was missing a chance for the entire city to acknowledge him. Let's go. At the break of dawn, the Green City army of 100,000 set off, splitting into several dozen small groups. They entered the forest as fast as they could, heading in the direction of the valley. These 100,000 people were natives of the Forest of Chaos, so they couldn't charge at each other in the forest like they did on the plains. However, when the army was split into countless small teams, they could move through the forest at high speeds, but they could maintain a high fighting state. Like this, even if there was a sudden change, they wouldn't be defeated like a mountain collapsing. Dolores turned around and shouted at Chu Tian, "The withered forest is in front of us." Chu Tian nodded, "Be careful and be on guard." The withered forest was the first forest to be contaminated by the death energy. The entire forest was soaked in a thick death energy, and there were no signs of any living creatures. Hundreds of thousands of indigenous people had died here, and it had become a tourist spot for living creatures. The little fox called out a few times, "Pay attention, there are large amounts of undead in front of us." Almost at the same time, warnings came from all around them. Following this was a beast-like roar as countless gargoyles fell from the sky, charging at their prey like eagles. "This is bad. It's the gargoyles." The undead religion's undead puppets were very hard to deal with, not to mention the gargoyles were carrying necromancers on their back. When the gargoyles charged down, pitiful cries came from all directions in the forest. This sudden and fierce attack had clearly caught everyone off guard. After the first round of attacks, there were heavy footsteps coming from the ground. 5 abominations led over 10,000 corpse eaters and countless zombies, densely covering the forest. They seemed like they had been waiting for a long time. There were a large amount of them, forming a large defensive line that was used to cushion Green City's attack. "Fuck!" Arnold roared out, "Why are there so many undead? Kill them for me!" Chapter 430. Chief Arnold released his spirit energy, and the energy turned into the shape of an incomparably strong bull. The Minotaur's source spirits were made of different bulls, and Arnold's source spirit was the Golden Barbarian Bull King. The Golden Barbarian Bull King was a very strong demon beast. This source spirit could not only increase one's strength, defense, and explosiveness. The most important thing was that the Golden Barbarian Bull King was a dual-attributed demon beast. Not only did it have an earth-attributed attack and defense, it also had a rare spiritual energy. In the legends, the Golden Barbarian Bull King used its gaze to kill its prey. This ability was called the Deathly Gaze. Of course, in essence, this was a very strong spiritual attack. Arnold's source spirit was the Golden Barbarian Bull King, so he had the Golden Barbarian Bull King's innate talent. It was a pity that spiritual attacks were useless against undead. This kind of monster could only be completely crushed and destroyed. When Arnold gave the order, several hundred elite Minotaurs released their source spirits at the same time. They were all incomparably strong bulls, and their source spirits covered their bodies, making the Minotaurs look like several hundred giant bulls digging the ground. That low roar that shook the forest immediately spread across the entire forest. Several hundred of them wildly charged forward. The earth shook and the forest trembled. The Minotaurs relied on their powerful bodies to charge forward, destroying everything in their path. Whether it was trees or rocks, they were all shattered. They were incredibly fast, and the zombies and corpse eaters in front of them did not have time to react. They could only see hundreds of different colored Minotaurs turn into hundreds of shockwaves as they charged forward, creating large fissures in the forest. Their bones were shattered and their bodies were torn apart. These zombies and ghouls were as weak as paper in front of the Minotaurs. They were sent flying or trampled one by one. The Minotaur's powerful charge was clearly displayed at this moment. Chu Tian was very shocked. These bulls actually have this kind of strength? Although Arnold doesn't have any brains, his battle strength is not bad. Dolores had to admit this point. The Minotaur's charge had caused too much of a commotion, and the undead army's main force quickly focused their attention here. There were at least 20 to 30 necromancers riding on gargoyles and leading dozens of gargoyles to intercept the rampaging Minotaurs. No matter how strong the Minotaurs were, they were still flesh and blood. No matter how strong the body of a necromancer was, it could still turn into a pile of rotten meat in an instant. But just as the necromancer was about to attack with all kinds of necromancy spells, Clark and a few half-elven priests riding hippogriffs soared through the air. The necromancers could only send the Minotaur's attacks at the green religion priest. The power of the gnomes came from the forest god, which was a pure life force. It was the complete opposite of the undead religion. Clark and the others had long since been on guard. They had set up several layers of defense, which just happened to be able to keep a low profile from the necromancer's attack. Half-elf who overestimates herself. Kill them. The half-elf and the necromancer immediately fought in mid-air. The half-elf's mount, the hippogriffs, was no match for the gargoyles, not to mention the gargoyles had the advantage in numbers. After both sides exchanged a few moves, the gnomes immediately fell into a disadvantage. The necromancer priest's petrifying light hit the hippogriffs of the gnomes, and that strong curse power instantly turned living creatures into statues. The gnomes quickly jumped off their mounts and shot a green arrow into the air. The gargoyles flapped their wings and the arrow filled with life force was sent flying. Go die. The gargoyles the necromancer priest was sitting on turned into a purple and black shadow as they charged forward. When they were about to smash the gnome's head to pieces, a crow suddenly came out of nowhere and entered the necromancer priest's chest. The necromancer priest shouted out in fear, "Shaman witchcraft!" The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Countless crows came out of the necromancer priest's chest and mouth, instantly turning the necromancer into minced meat. So it was the shaman sorcerers riding bats to join the battle. The shaman witchcraft was basically useless against the undead, but for the necromancers controlling the gargoyles, it was a very dangerous power. A necromancer priest angrily roared, "That trash Mars really can't do anything right. He actually has this many traitors under his hands." Luz was riding on the back of a giant witchcraft bat. Without saying a single word, he released a large amount of colorful poisonous insects that were like a rainbow cloud, quickly filling the surroundings. These were the witchcraft techniques of the shaman sorcerers. Although the gargoyles were not afraid, the necromancers were living people, and they were clear on the shaman's method. This kind of ability was hard to defend against, so they did not dare approach. The gnomes used arrows to shoot down the gargoyles one by one. At this time, the battle in the forest had entered an intense stage. It was clear that the undead army had been refined recently. They were locals that lived in this area, and because they were polluted by large amounts of death energy, they became undead. These undead were not much stronger than when they were alive, and they did not have any intelligence. It was impossible for the cultivation techniques and martial skills they had when they were alive to be preserved. With just the normal zombies and ghouls, it was impossible for them to stop the Green City army. But at this time, 5 abominations charged forward. These 5 abominations could not compare to the one that was killed in Green City yesterday. But they were all around the 4th true spirit layer. Now that there were 5 of them, it was a very large scene. The necromancers controlled large amounts of gargoyles, ghouls, and zombies. They were all centered around the 5 abominations, forming 5 groups. This was because the abomination could release a highly toxic death fog. This kind of poisonous fog was very destructive to living creatures, but it didn't harm the undead that were under the cover of the poisonous fog. This made it a lot more difficult to deal with them. Dolores knit her brows. "Demonic god followers, it's time for us to make a move." Hundreds of demon god summoners began to use their summoning technique. Hundreds of spirit beasts appeared in front of them. Although spirit beasts' abilities were greatly weakened in all aspects, as spirit beasts, They were no longer afraid of normal attacks. Thus, they were able to charge to the front without fear of the poison fog of necromancy. There weren't enough summoners. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to stop them for long. When the battle was in full swing, there was another change. There was an explosion coming from the distance and large amounts of dark red clouds that were like a sticky substance poured into the sky. An incomparably large source energy array appeared in the sky. The scale of the source energy array was very large. It almost covered the entire sky. This is bad. The Lich was speeding up, most likely wanting to complete the ceremony ahead of time. This source energy array had not been condensed to its peak, but with its current strength, it was more than enough to destroy Green City. This is bad. There are too many undead in front of us. With the abominations guarding them, our main force can't charge through at all. The dark red clouds spread across the sky like a tide, and a portion of them charged at the forest. Everyone could feel the terrifying energy contained within the dark clouds, but they could only watch it come closer. Hong! A large sound rang out. A bolt of black lightning fell down from the dark clouds. The thunderbolts struck the spiritual beasts, and with a single strike, dozens of spiritual beasts were annihilated. This was just the beginning. More and more black thunderbolts continued to fall, and each of them contained an extremely strong power of death. If they struck a living being, they would instantly turn that living being into an undead spirit. If they struck an undead creature, it would be as if they were injected with stimulants, causing their strength to skyrocket. Dolores's expression became uglier and uglier. This is bad, we'll most likely lose if we keep fighting like this. Chu Tian shook his head and said, "It's really useless, let me do it. Fox, let's see you first." The little fox jumped out and turned into a mass of gray mist, appearing several hundred meters in the air. Then it teleported several times and instantly charged into the dark clouds that covered their head. The little fox's snow-white body could be ignored in front of the giant energy cloud. But with just a gentle breath, it created the effect of all rivers flowing into the sea, causing the incomparably dense energy cloud to change shape. All of it surged towards the little fox's body, and the lightning of death that was gathering in the dark clouds instantly disappeared. Chu Tian used the void escaping to charge through the undead. Large amounts of gargoyles and ghouls surrounded them, but they had no effect on Chu Tian. 18 figures followed behind Chu Tian, and their speed was not any slower than Chu Tian's. The 18 divine blood-eaten corpses were covered in a glow, just like 18 dark golden bronze statues. A palm shot out. The gargoyles were shattered to pieces. The low-level undead were like chickens that couldn't withstand a single blow. Even if they crawled around the divine blood-eaten corpses like ants, as long as the divine blood-eaten corpses released light, it would cover all the undead within several dozen meters. Finally, they would be torn to pieces by the vast energy released by the divine blood-eaten corpses. The divine blood-eaten corpses' steps were incomparably steady, not changing at all. They were not affected by these attacks at all. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the power of the divine blood-eaten corpses. This was a pretty good chance to use it. He could test just how strong these fellows were. Chu Tian gave an order to the divine blood-eaten corpses. Leaving 3 divine blood-eaten corpses to guard, the other 15 divine blood-eaten corpses split into 5 groups of 3. Each group had the same goal, the abomination. Chu Tian wanted to control these divine blood-eaten corpses and destroy the abomination surrounded by tens of thousands of undead. This was an almost impossible matter. The abomination was a very powerful undead monster, and there were large amounts of ghouls and gargoyles protecting it. How could 3 divine blood-eaten corpses approach it? Chu Tian had a lot of confidence in the divine blood-eaten corpses. A battle puppet refined from the blood of a spiritual god, its strength could not be underestimated. Chapter 431. The little fox's aura swallowing the mountains and rivers stopped the powerful energy cloud from spreading, completely shocking the necromancers. This energy came from the ruins, and it was incomparably pure. Unless it was an expert on the level of the Elven King, it was impossible for them to resist it. How did this little life form do this? The energy it had just swallowed was enough to create an undead army. At this time, the divine blood-eaten corpses were running faster and faster, and the light they released was becoming brighter. The energy that leaked out of their bodies tightly wrapped around them, turning them into glowing balls. With an unstoppable momentum, they crushed through the undead monsters. That's right. It was a crushing. Even if it was just a little bit, the undead were instantly turned to powder. The divine blood-eaten corpses' charge was 10 times stronger than the Minotaurs. Even if there was an army in front of them, it would be like 10 million ants, they could just step over them. Looking down on everything, pressing forward, the gargoyles kept sending out curses, hoping to slow it down, but this kind of attack had no effect on the divine blood-eaten corpses. The loathsome evil seemed to have felt a sense of danger, and immediately let out a deep roar. It awakened a powerful death energy from within its body. In the end, it quickly surged out of its body in the form of a shockwave. The energy flow that was like a tsunami overflowed in all directions. Everything in the surroundings was quickly petrified and turned into obsidian without any signs of life. It was this move again. The 3 divine blood-eaten corpses were less than 5 meters away from the attack. The energy that was like a ball of light covering the eaten corpses was like a snowball in boiling water, melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. That jet-black energy continued to erode the center of the eaten corpses. The necromancer priest let out a sigh of relief. These fellows were indeed a bit strange, but their strength didn't seem to be as strong as he had imagined. The abomination's high purity and concentration of death energy erupted in a single breath. This kind of high-speed energy flow could directly envelop and seep into the surrounding matter, changing it from the very core, which was why it could erase any existence. The energy on the surface of the divine blood-eaten corpses was not strong enough, so the high-speed energy shot through this energy and landed on their bodies. Without any protection, it was impossible for them to block this kind of attack. They would instantly turn into 3 black obsidian statues. As expected, the moment the divine blood-eaten corpse's protective energy was completely eroded away, the black energy wildly sprayed over its body like paint. The divine blood-eaten corpse was quickly covered in a layer of black from head to toe, and it was glossy like obsidian. Was he killed? That was all there was to it. Dolores frowned in confusion. However, just as everyone was shocked and the necromancer was ridiculing him, she discovered that Chu Tian revealed an enigmatic smile. Then, a shocking scene occurred. The 3 figures that had clearly turned into human-shaped obsidian statues were still moving forward and maintaining their previous speed. They pounced on the abomination from 3 different angles and punched the abomination's body at the same time. People could clearly see the black traces of the divine blood-eaten corpse quickly fading. It wasn't fading, the energy didn't disappear, it was just leaving the body. It went from every corner of the body to the right arm and finally gathered in the fist. It condensed into a small piece that was sent back into the abomination's body. The 3 punches landed on the abomination's body. The energy released from the punches caused the abomination's body to instantly turn into stone, and then it exploded. The abomination was directly knocked to the ground, and a third of its body disappeared. The abomination's power did not harm the divine blood-eaten corpse. This power was absorbed by the divine blood-eaten corpse and used by the divine blood-eaten corpse to send a punch back at the abomination's body. This kind of attack was unheard of. Don't think that the abomination is that easy to defeat. The necromancer priest quickly controlled the abomination. Ignorant people, I'll let you see the true power of the abomination. The abomination was an undead creature. It couldn't even be considered a normal undead creature because the abomination did not have a soul flame. It was just a mixture of flesh and energy, so it did not have any weakness. Even if it was cut into pieces, it would not die. Roar! The loathsome evil let out a deafening roar, and its body continued to tear apart. It quickly opened its countless mouths, and countless long things that looked like blood vessels and tentacles exploded out, like fireworks exploding in all directions. They were faster and sharper than arrows, and they stabbed into the bodies of the ghouls one by one. The ghouls let out painful howls as their originally strong bodies withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Large amounts of flesh and blood were sucked out, and they finally turned into a bag of bones that fell to the ground. The abomination instantly recovered a large amount of flesh and energy. The missing parts of its body were replenished, and the red tentacle-like things were still wandering around its body, stabbing into the ghouls' bodies and devouring the surrounding ghouls as if they were hungry and thirsty. In just a few seconds, 100 ghouls had been eaten by the abomination. The abomination seemed to have become taller and more muscular, becoming even more sinister and terrifying. This kind of undead monster was already an existence that couldn't be measured by common sense. It was originally a monster formed from the combination of flesh and energy under the undead church's secret technique. Therefore, as long as the secret technique on its body wasn't broken, it couldn't be truly killed. The abomination was more tenacious than any other undead creature. Hey, 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 how about it? The necromancer priest rode on the back of the gargoyle and looked down on them with a victorious attitude. The abomination is undying and can swallow all flesh and blood. As long as there are materials, it can recover at any time. Even if you have heaven-defying skills, you shouldn't think of defeating the abomination in this kind of environment. This terrifying scene did not make Chu Tian's expression change at all. He just revealed a taunting and disdainful smile, and the 3 corpses charged at the abomination again. Seeking death. The abomination's arms split open and a black bone blade appeared. It sent out 2 slashes from the left and right, and the blade glow sent the divine blood corpses flying. The might of these 2 attacks was too strong, and the divine blood corpses did not have any protection at all. They used their flesh to block these attacks and were split in half. The last divine blood corpse charged at the abomination. The abomination's large belly suddenly split open, and it was like an incomparably large mouth. It was filled with rotten flesh and dense rows of teeth, making people's scalps go numb just looking at it. The abomination did not give the divine blood corpses any chance to escape. The tentacles on its body shot out at the same time and tightly wrapped around the divine blood corpses. Then it threw them into its large mouth. The large mouth closed. The belly closed. The loathsome evil's fat stomach wriggled as if it was a big mouth chewing on food. The sound of bones and flesh being crushed could be heard. A person was swallowed whole just like that, or rather, stuffed into its stomach. Furthermore, with the loathsome evil's strength, even if a piece of iron was stuffed into its stomach, it would instantly disintegrate into nothingness. The necromancer priest said with a cold smile, "This kind of thing is only fit to be a snack for the abomination." Chu Tian smiled without saying a word. "I'm afraid your teeth aren't good enough. The consequences of eating something bad are very serious." When Chu Tian spoke, the 2 corpses that had been split in half did not bleed at all. They were like 2 magnets that were attracted to each other and stood up once again. Their clothes had already been destroyed, and they were completely naked. The divine blood corpses had been refined for a long time, and their outer appearances had already changed greatly. From head to toe, there were no signs of gender. There was no hair, no pores, and the dark golden skin that seemed to be cast from gold and copper was covered in dense runes. Both of his eyes were open, but there was nothing in his eye sockets, only a scarlet radiance radiating from them. "What is this?" Everyone was stunned by this undead that didn't seem like an undead, a living being that didn't seem like a living being. Being split in half from head to toe, the giant instantly healed. Could it be that they wouldn't die? At this moment, the loathsome evil's body began to convulse, making a sound similar to boiling water. Its originally huge and malevolent body suddenly became irregular, like a piece of wax that was rapidly melting under high temperature. Pieces of rotten flesh fell off, and the loathsome evil's body swelled up. "What is going on?" The necromancer priest found that he could no longer control the abomination. The abomination's body seemed to be filled with a kind of energy that was like a terrifying virus that was seeping into every corner of the abomination's body. It made the abomination's body lose control, and it began to collapse at an unbelievable speed. Hong! The abomination completely exploded. The energy in its body was released at once, which was equivalent to an explosion. Although it couldn't compare to the explosion in Green City, it was still enough to cover several hundred meters. All the ghouls, gargoyles, and zombies in this area, as well as the necromancers that couldn't escape in time, were all killed. The divine blood-eaten corpses walked out from the center of the explosion. Its body was also heavily deformed, but its bones gave off crackling sounds as they quickly returned to their original position, finally returning to normal. The 3 divine blood-eaten corpses were not injured at all. The divine blood-eaten corpses dared to swallow them? The divine blood could break all curses, and it could also break death energy. Not to mention a trivial abomination, even if the bone dragon swallowed the divine blood-eaten corpses, it would still suffer. At this time, there were explosions coming from several directions. Several abominations had already been killed. Chu Tian was very pleased with this result. It really wasn't a waste to pay such a large price. These eaten corpses had almost immortal bodies, at least with the power of the true spirit realm. It would be very hard to kill them. This was the power brought by the divine blood. In the ancient god's memory crystal, these puppets were called divine servants. The divine servants were not gods, but they had a portion of a god's power. Now the 18 divine blood-eaten corpses were about to be transformed into divine servants. Although they were not very strong, they had high growth potential. Chapter 432. Under the little fox's wild swallowing, the energy cloud gradually disappeared. The little fox immediately returned after completing its task, and the 18 divine servants also returned to its side. The necromancer's face became very ugly. This was truly strange. The undead army created by the undead ruins and the energy released by the undead ruins was enough to crush Green City, but who would have thought that the undead religion would be the one becoming weaker and weaker? What was going on? This was completely out of their expectations. The 5 abominations were directly killed. The energy cloud was disintegrated before it could even be used. Under the wild attacks of the forest army, the undead monsters began to show signs of being pushed back. They didn't hope to destroy the other side, they just hoped to stop them here, giving the Lord Lich enough time to complete the ceremony. Once this heaven-shocking array was activated, Green City would be instantly destroyed, and the millions of people would turn into undead. No matter how the other side struggled, it would all be useless. Now the large net covering the sky was becoming larger and larger, gathering more and more energy, but this array was too large. Even if it continued like this, it wouldn't be enough without half a day. What could the undead army use to block it? Just relying on these tens of thousands of ghouls and zombies? We can't waste time here. Chu Tian knew that the Lich was completing the ceremony ahead of time, and this place was quite far from the valley, so they didn't have time to waste. He shouted to the others, "We'll charge over and kill that Lich." "Alright. Charge over." Although their losses weren't small, everyone became braver as they fought. After all, this concerned the fate of the entire clan, so no one could afford to lose this battle. Chu Tian led the 18 divine servants in the lead. Relying on the void escaping to protect himself, even if he passed through the army, it would be hard for him to receive any damage. The 18 divine servants followed behind him. These puppets had shocking defenses, being immune to curses, death energy, and dark energy attacks, so they were unobstructed. Of course, the little fox was the most important. It could swallow the attacks coming from all directions. When large groups of undead monsters surrounded them, the little fox just needed to gently suck them in. Whether it was the gargoyles, ghouls, or other high-level undead, the soul flames of the undead monsters would be sucked out. The little fox's special ability was an instant kill. One person, one fox, and 18 puppets, unscrupulously shuttled through tens of thousands of undead. Wherever they passed, the undead would fall to the ground. So many necromancers had besieged them, but they couldn't do anything to them. Chu Tian's power alone was enough to suppress most of the undead. How could the Green City people not be shocked? How could the Church of the Undead not be shocked? People had no choice but to accept Chu Tian wholeheartedly. If this human didn't interfere, perhaps Green City wouldn't even need to wait for the undead religion to make a move. The shamans would destroy Green City first, and the undead religion would be the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, it would be hard for Green City to have a good ending. In the end, this person ruined the shaman's plan. Now, it brought such a huge blow to the undead church. The undead couldn't hold on any longer. However, at this moment, the scales of victory began to tilt. From the direction of the basin, a large number of densely packed black shadows appeared, impressively tens of thousands of Een souls. Each one had a fierce green face and sharp fangs. They were the most ferocious of the Een souls, being made of strong death energy. They had form but no substance, and there were a large number of them. The Een souls let out sharp howls, and their bodies began to turn red. They fell down from the sky like meteors, and the already withered and dead forest immediately exploded into hundreds and thousands of holes. This was an indiscriminate bombardment. Whether it was the undead army or the forest army, they were all in the range of the specter bombs. The specter bombs did not release flames or normal shockwaves, rather it released a strong death energy and spiritual energy. This attack did little damage to the undead army, but it was very harmful to normal beings. This wave of explosions did not end yet. Another large group of gargoyles appeared in the sky. These gargoyles were carrying soldiers covered in black armor and energy. When Chu Tian saw the appearance of these soldiers, his expression slightly changed. Dread Knights? The Lich truly had some skills. He could even create this kind of thing. There weren't many Dread Knights, but there were still several hundred of them. Don't look down on several hundred Dread Knights, their battle strength was very terrifying. If Chu Tian's guesses weren't wrong, these Dread Knights were collected by the Lich from the forest. They were made from the corpses of the old chiefs of the large tribes. Those old chiefs that died of old age or accidents were all very strong. When they were turned into Dread Knights, they could recover most of their strength from when they were alive, and they could even keep a part of their cultivation technique from when they were alive. The black heavy armor on the bodies of these high-level undead wasn't real armor, but was condensed from dark energy. The appearance of these undead basically retained the appearance of when they were alive, but their eyes were spewing soul flames, and their whole body was wrapped in a dark undead aura. 400-500 Dread Knights joined the battle. This was a very strong battle strength. Although a single Dread Knight could not compare to an abomination, 4-5 of them together were stronger than an abomination. Now that there were several hundred Dread Knights joining the battle, this was equivalent to adding in the battle strength of over 100 abominations. This would immediately put a large pressure on Green City. A Dread Knight raised its large sword to attack at a shocking speed. If he didn't use the Netherworld Flame Sword, Chu Tian could only barely keep up. The large sword was covered in black energy, and it could instantly send out over 20 sword glows, all attacking different parts of Chu Tian's body. The Dread Knights were not just fast, their attacks were also very strong. With Chu Tian's void escaping, he could not block them, so he could only retreat. A sword chi swept out and the Dread Knight raised its sword to block the Netherworld sword chi. It only retreated a few steps before stabilizing itself, and chasing after Chu Tian like a shadow. The little fox did not give it a chance this time. The soul flame in the Dread Knight's helmet floated a few times before leaking out of the gaps in the armor. Finally it was swallowed by the little fox. Chu Tian heaved a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid of the Terror Knights, but these guys were too strong. There would be no end to the fight, and Chu Tian didn't have time to waste here. Before the forest army could recover from the bombardment, the Terror Knights had already launched a round of attacks. This time Green City and the forest locals were caught off guard, so they suffered heavy losses. The necromancer was overjoyed to see this. The Dread Knights were the personal guards that Lord Lich had refined. Lord Lich must have sensed that the situation here was not good, so he sent his personal guards over. With the help of the Dread Knights, the pressure could be slightly alleviated. He couldn't take it anymore. They didn't have enough soldiers. They hadn't even reached the basin. Clark revealed an anxious expression. It would be bad for Green City if they kept fighting like this, but when Clark was filled with anxiety, a sudden situation appeared. Look! A group of magical beasts is coming. In the sky above Green City, there was a large group of demon beasts charging over. There were dragon hawks, twin-legged flying dragons, thunderbirds, and all kinds of demon beasts, reaching 2,000–3,000 of them. Druids. The Druids are here. These magic beasts were transformed from Druids. The Druids directly attacked the undead army. These powerful magic beasts had terrifying destructive power, and under this round of crazy attacks, the undead army that had just turned the situation around instantly fell into a disadvantageous position. The little fox continued to jump through the Dread Knight. In just 5–6 minutes, several dozen Dread Knights had been killed. The Druids had always been neutral. At this critical moment, they had helped Green City resolve this crisis. However, Chu Tian was not surprised by this at all. The undead religion was not targeting a single city, they wanted to turn the entire area into an undead land. The Druids had lived in Green City for many years, so how could they tolerate this kind of thing happening? This was why they decided to help Green City. Roar! A deep dragon roar came from the sky. A green dragon that was more than 10 meters long swooped down from the sky. Scorching dragon breath sprayed out, turning the ground into a sea of fire wherever it passed. Hundreds of undead monsters were burned to ashes by the terrifying dragon breath. Prophet Yoda! Prophet Yoda had made a move. This was something that had never been seen before. We are here to help Sir City Lord. After the green dragon fiercely cleaned up the undead monsters, it landed beside Chu Tian. It lowered its giant dragon head, and a deep voice came from its mouth. Let me give you a ride. Ha ha ha, then I'll have to trouble you. Chu Tian brought the little fox and the divine servant to stand on the green dragon's back. He forcefully waved his hand. Green citizens, follow this city lord to kill. Long live the city lord. Long live the city lord. At this moment the other druids also brought a lot of elite. This group of people shouted as they flew through the vast forest towards the axis of the evil energy at an extremely fast speed. When they looked into the distance, they could vaguely see the basin in front of them. The entire basin was like a giant basin that was filled with dense dark energy and death energy. There was a giant pillar of energy that pierced through the clouds, stirring up the entire sky. It was sending the energy from the ground into the sky and distributing it to the giant array. Chu Tian was puzzled. The energy in these ruins was a bit too strong. What kind of messy things were buried in it? But he didn't have time to think about it at this moment. Destroying this damn place was the most important matter right now. The Druids, Green Religion, Shaman Religion, Arnold, Dolores, and the other forest elites had all been in conflict with each other and had fought many times, but now they were united like never before. They were facing a common enemy, the undead religion. Chapter 433. The Lich floated above the conical-shaped altar. This altar was still continuously sending out energy, which was then distributed to the surrounding towers of undead souls. The towers of undead souls then completed the arrangement of the undead soul formation, allowing the energy to be continuously sent into the sky, converging into one and finally pouring into the dome, forming an astonishingly powerful formation. The undead army had been completely routed. Chu Tian brought Yoda, Clark, Arnold, Dolores, and the others, as well as thousands of elites. They had already surrounded the altar at this moment. "Stop," Clark said to the lich floating in the air like a ghost. "You've already lost." "Lost? Now you're talking about winning and losing, and you're being carried away." The lich looked down at everyone, standing in the air, his cloak fluttering in the wind. A pair of eyes burning with blue flames revealed a cold and silent expression. Even though the lich didn't have eyes, Chu Tian could feel that the other was looking at him. "I've never seen a human like you before." You flatter me, you flatter me. I've never seen a lich like you before." Chu Tian grinned. "Even though you've caused a lot of trouble, I can still give you a chance. Stop the ceremony, stop the undead army, surrender to me and I won't destroy you." The lich didn't have any emotions. Even if Chu Tian pointed at his nose and scolded him, he wouldn't feel any anger, so Chu Tian didn't care about his choice of words at all. "If you perform well, I can make a body for you to reincarnate." "Reincarnate?" The lich indifferently said. "I'm not interested." If it was a normal lich, this would be an irresistible temptation, because after becoming a lich, one would gradually lose their humanity until they completely lost the feeling of being alive. The lich would use all kinds of methods to find themselves before they were completely numb. Returning to being a living being was undoubtedly the best choice, but this was something that was almost impossible to do. Turning a living being into an undead was extremely difficult. Transforming a dead spirit into a living being was even more difficult than ascending to heaven. The lich did not believe in Chu Tian. He did not even believe that anyone in this world could do it. Moreover, as a person who had lived for 2,000 years, his personality had long been completely frozen. There would not be the slightest fluctuation, so he did not care about life or death. He was not afraid of destruction, and he did not yearn for a new life. This was the reason why Chu Tian hated liches. Everyone thought that becoming a lich would grant them immortality. In fact, after reaching this state, what difference was there from dying? Eternal life? How could immortality be so easy in this world? What's the point of telling it all this? Clark looked at the increasing energy and became anxious. If the lich wants to delay the ritual, the consequences will be irreversible. A lich that had lived for 2,000 years. He was like a living fossil, and anyone who could become a lich was a knowledgeable person. If he could recruit such a person, it would definitely be of great help to him. It was a pity that with the current situation, there was no time to negotiate. This lich did not have any emotions in his head. He did not have any desires or fears. He was just like an ice-cold machine, forever carrying out his last thought before his personality disappeared, which was to seek benefits and avoid harm. The lich did not believe in Chu Tian and was not interested in rebirth. It would be better to turn Green City into an undead land. This would be more beneficial to him. "It's been too long since I've fought with anyone." The lich's voice did not have any fluctuations. "Now let me see just what kind of strength you have." As the lich spoke, it slowly raised its two skinny arms. The surrounding towers of undead spirits all emitted power like lighthouses. A pitch-black corrosion quickly spread out, as if it was constantly corroding space, causing the entire world to be plunged into darkness. The earth shook. Skeletons climbed out one by one. The entire valley was filled with skeleton soldiers, and each skeleton looked like they were carved from black jade. There was a strong spirit flame burning in their skulls as they began to move under the lich's command. There were too many skeletons, and Chu Tian's group was like an island surrounded by a sea of bones. They did not have an advantage in terms of numbers. These skeletons were not simple skeletons. The Lich had used a large amount of death energy to awaken them, so they had a shocking strength for a short period of time. Because there were too many of them, even if they were piled up, they would still die. The little fox revealed a grin. It did not need Chu Tian's orders as it took the initiative to charge out. It passed through the sea of skeletons and a blue soul flame sea appeared wherever it went. Large amounts of soul flames came out of the skeletons and finally gathered in the little fox's mouth, becoming a delicacy for it to swallow. Chu Tian said with a smile, "If you only have this bit of skill, I advise you to surrender earlier." With this large amount of skeleton soldiers, if they were on the battlefield, they would be invincible. They were not afraid of death and they had decent strength, they were simply natural soldiers. But they just had to meet the undead's nemesis, the little fox. No matter how many there were, it was useless because they couldn't get close at all. Clark loudly ordered, "Destroy everything here." Everyone began to attack in all directions, trying to destroy the towers of the undead. They quickly found a problem. Each tower of the undead was protected by a strong energy, so destroying any one of them was not an easy matter. At this time, the Lich coldly chanted an incantation and the towers of the undead released black lightning, attacking these people with lightning speed. The death energy condensed into lightning that hit living beings, turning them into undead monsters. This kind of attack was even more terrifying than normal energy attack. The little fox used its 4 limbs to destroy the skeletons. It found a problem: there seemed to be no end to the skeletons. It had just destroyed a group of skeletons, but when it came back, it found that these skeletons had stood up again. Originally, there was too much death energy in the valley, and this energy could continuously summon skeletons, making the little fox too busy to deal with it. Chu Tian slightly narrowed his eyes. The entire valley's energy was in the Lich's hands, so he was an invincible existence. He could control the towers of the undead to attack, and he could summon skeletons endlessly. If they didn't have a way to break this great undead array, everyone would be exhausted to death in the end. The Lich Fiend didn't stop his attacks. He slowly raised his arms, and the dozen or so towers of undead spirits all shot black lightning at the Lich Fiend. Countless lightning bolts gathered in the Lich Fiend's hands, and almost in the blink of an eye, they formed an incomparably huge ball of lightning. His hands gently raised it. The energy ball slowly rose up, and it was still wildly gathering energy from all directions. Its color became brighter and brighter, finally turning into a black as thick as iron. Moreover, it was growing at an incredible speed, and in just a short 10 seconds, it had become as big as a small mountain. Everyone's expression changed. Although they knew that the Lich was not weak, it wasn't to the point of being invincible. At least the druid prophet Yoda had the ability to fight him, but after the Lich borrowed the power of the array, his strength increased by more than 10 times. In this situation, no one was a match for him. Once the energy ball fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yoda softly coughed a few times while leaning on his cane. An unexpected power erupted from his body, and he was covered in green light. Now that things had reached this point, he could only take on this move. "Prophet, wait." Chu Tian calmly walked over. "Let me deal with this fellow." "You?" Everyone was stunned. There was no need to doubt Prophet Yoda's strength. If Yoda turned into a dragon, he could even fight a spirit transformation cultivator. Chu Tian was just a trivial earth spirit cultivator, and was only in the first true spirit layer. The little fox couldn't deal with this at all, so what could he use to resist this power? Chu Tian did not explain as he jumped up and charged at the towers of the undead like an arrow. He wanted to destroy the towers of the undead and make the energy ball lose balance? That was impossible. These towers of the undead were protected by a powerful energy. It was not something Chu Tian could break with his strength. When everyone thought that Chu Tian's actions were meaningless, Chu Tian's body suddenly released a burst of power. A terrifying source spirit aura soared into the sky, turning Chu Tian's eyes a deathly gray color. The Lich muttered when he saw this, "Undead energy? Does he have the power of the dead in his body?" Chu Tian's body was covered in a layer of gray mist. When the gray mist came out, it was absorbed by the towers of the undead. Chu Tian gave a low roar, "Break!" Several explosions came from the towers of the undead. Large amounts of cracks appeared on the towers of the undead. The cracks kept increasing and spreading faster and faster, finally covering the entire towers of the undead. Finally it exploded with a large sound. Dolores was very shocked. How did he do it? The towers of the undead were built to absorb death energy. Our powerful city lord seems to also have undead energy. Yoda said with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. The towers of the undead will repel any energy that comes near them, but it will not repel death energy. He used the death energy to create an imbalance inside the towers of the undead, achieving his goal of destroying the towers of the undead. That floating in the sky, the almost completely condensed energy ball suddenly began to distort. Then it began to bulge. It was clear that it had lost its balance. Be careful of your defenses. Everyone hurriedly activated their protective essence force, and the energy ball exploded in midair. The explosion didn't emit any light or heat. Instead, a cold current enveloped the entire canyon, and the entire heaven and earth was instantly enveloped in endless darkness. Although it was far away, although the energy ball was not complete, and although they had protective spirit energy, there were still some weak people that were heavily injured. It could be seen how strong this attack was. Suddenly, the endless darkness was swept away by a stream of air and was finally swallowed into the little fox's stomach. Chu Tian looked at the Lich on the altar. "What other skills do you have?" The Lich did not say anything. He had to admit that this human was hard to deal with. Since it was like this, he could only use his last move. The earth began to tremble. Everyone could clearly feel a strong sense of resentment being released from the depths of the earth. A large amount of gray fog gushed out from the cracked surface of the ground. Shortly after, the ground continued to shatter, as if something was propping it up. First, a pile of incomparably large gray wings stretched out from the ground, followed by an incomparably large body and incomparably large claws. Bone dragon? Chu Tian was shocked. Is there a dragon tomb below us? Chapter 434. Bone Dragon, as the name implied. This was an undead formed from the bones of a dragon. The dragon race was a large group. There were high-level dragons like giant dragons and flood dragons, as well as low-level dragons like earth dragons and dinosaurs. The bone dragon that appeared in front of Chu Tian, although it was not a peak-level giant dragon, it was still an undead formed from a dragon. Turning a high-level dragon into an undead was not an easy matter. No matter how strong the Lich was, he was still in the heaven spirit realm. Even if he had 100 years, he might not be able to create an undead bone dragon. This bone dragon's corpse had been buried here a long time ago. It had been nurtured in this extreme environment for countless years, and each bone was filled with death energy. It was already an excellent undead material, and as long as it was awakened with a special method, it would immediately become a terrifying undead monster. After the Lich had awakened the bone dragon, his body, which was floating above the altar, suddenly shot out in a straight line. His body ignited in blue flames in midair, like a burning butterfly. He actually started to burn rapidly and finally landed on the body of the huge bone dragon that was shrouded in gray energy. What is it doing? Sacrifice technique. Chu Tian was a bit surprised at the Lich's actions. The Lich's body is used as a sacrifice to transform the body, pouring all of its soul flame and spirit into the bone dragon's body, merging with the bone dragon and breaking away from the Lich's body. The dragon's skeleton contained an incomparably strong resentment and curse. This was something that any soul would find hard to endure, but the Lich was not affected at all, so he slowly refined the bone dragon's thoughts. In order to make this powerful body his own, He had no choice but to merge with the bone dragon ahead of time. Roar! The bone dragon roared at the sky as if it had been reborn. Its skeleton-like body was filled with blue flames. From its head to its tail, from its body to its wings, its entire body seemed to be wrapped in a layer of gray membrane. Blue-white flames flowed within this membrane. That was the Lich's full power. The bone dragon's eyes released a purple glow. The Lich's soul flame was already sealed in the bone dragon's body. This was no longer just a bone dragon, but a Lich dragon. The Lich's powerful strength and the bone dragon's destructive power fused into one. With a casual flap of its giant wings, a fierce energy flowed into the surroundings. Its 30-meter-long body was covered in a powerful energy, and there was not a single blind spot from head to toe. However, when the Lich dragon was formed, it immediately felt a strong attractive force that quickly stole its energy. This fellow was none other than the little fox. The Lich dragon angrily roared, and with a lightning-fast speed, a giant flaming dragon claw suddenly slammed into the little fox. It was like slamming an ant to death as it slammed the little fox into the ground. The wild strength caused the surrounding several dozen meters to collapse. Dolores was shocked. Lord Demon God! A gray mist appeared on Chu Tian's shoulder and the little fox suddenly turned around and came back. There was no way around it, the Lich dragon was too strong. It was different from the undead monsters that didn't have any thoughts. The Lich dragon still had the Lich's memories and wisdom, even the Lich's spells. The Lich was clearly on guard against the little fox. Therefore, it used a secret technique to seal the soul flame. As long as the soul flame was still there, the Lich dragon wouldn't be destroyed. As for the energy that was sucked away, it didn't count for anything. The Lich dragon didn't care at all. As long as it was within several dozen miles, the Lich dragon could directly absorb energy from the undead towers. Its energy was endless and there was no way to defeat it. The Lich dragon's giant body circled in the sky. Although it had been turned into a Lich dragon, the ceremony did not stop. Rather, it became even more ferocious, and if this continued, Green City would be destroyed in at most an hour. Stop him! Clark led the gnomes to make a move. Giant logs rose from the ground and each log was several dozen meters long. They were all covered in runes that wrapped around the Lich dragon's body. Who would have thought that before this energy could be added to the Lich dragon, a flame would come out of the Lich dragon's mouth and instantly burn everything to ashes. This flame did not dissipate because of this, and when the flame fell on the sea of skeletons, it was like a flame falling into alcohol as it quickly spread in all directions. Large amounts of skeleton warriors were ignited by the flames. Not only were these skeletons not destroyed when they were ignited, rather it was like they were filled with a powerful energy. Their bodies were covered in flames and whether it was their speed or strength, they all increased by several times. Their madness increased by over 100 times as they wildly attacked like a swarm of bloodthirsty ants. Die here and become one of us. The Lich dragon's emotionless voice reverberated through the sky and could be heard even from several dozen miles away. Several dozen undead towers filled its body with energy and the Lich dragon's aura became stronger and stronger. At this time in the center of the sea of burning undead, there was also a majestic dragon's roar. Yoda's 1-meter-tall body turned into a green dragon that was over 10 meters tall. A burning dragon's breath was released and several hundred skeleton warriors were burned to ashes. Druid? Your strength is far too lacking. The Lich dragon charged down and the green dragon charged up. These two powerful beings released dragon's breath at the same time and the two flames released sizzling sounds. Finally the two giant figures collided with each other and the Lich dragon pressed the green dragon to the ground. Both sides began a fierce battle. The green dragon was only several meters long and the Lich dragon was over 30 meters long, so the green dragon did not have any advantage in size. Not to mention that Yoda was injured and the Lich dragon was not only strong, it also had an inexhaustible energy. Yoda could not beat the other side. As expected, the two dragons fiercely attacked each other at the same time. The green dragon spat out a dragon flame filled with the aura of life, burning most of the Lich Dragon's wings. The Lich Dragon's death energy condensed into flames that burned the green dragon's back and abdomen, causing large pieces of rotten flesh to fall down like rain. The green dragon's life force was very strong. If it was a normal creature, even if it was a mammoth, this flame would have turned it into an undead mammoth. The green dragon was clearly not lightly injured. The flames on the Lich Dragon's left wing were covered by the black energy and were extinguished in just a few seconds. It did not seem like it had suffered any damage at all. Yoda could not last more than a few minutes. Now that the others were surrounded by the sea of skeletons, it would be hard for them to support him. Even if they had a chance to support him, could they pose a threat to this Lich Dragon with infinite strength? Too weak. The Lich Dragon sent the injured green dragon flying several meters with a single attack. The wounds on the Lich Dragon's body quickly healed with the undead energy. You are not worthy of Green City. Eternal darkness and death will give you eternity. You think you've already won? When the Lich Dragon heard this voice, it was a bit stunned. It found that this unfathomable human had taken advantage of its battle with the druid to jump onto the altar. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Chu Tian stood in the center of the altar's array and released his nine-eyed demon god source spirit. An aura that looked down on the world seemed to suppress the Lich Dragon. Chu Tian's eyes had already turned an ash-gray color. This was the color of death energy. Your array is too crude. I just casually looked at it and found the method to control it. Chu Tian suddenly clapped his hands together. In that instant, the wind and clouds changed. The sky was filled with surging waves of energy, and the undead towers all around began to tremble. The Lich Dragon's mind that had not fluctuated in several hundred years suddenly had a ripple as it was filled with a feeling of shock. Impossible, this array was dug out by me from the ruins and I used 300 years to perfect it before I could control it. Chu Tian used his actions to answer the Lich Dragon. The array in the sky began to change. The runes began to reform and the formation began to change, gradually turning into a new source energy array. The energy that had been sent out, in just a short few seconds, began to gather in the direction of the basin. A huge wave of ripples spread out. The Lich Dragon found that it was gradually losing control of the surrounding undead. The large group of undead attacking Clark and the others all stopped like a machine that had been shut down. When they started up again, they all turned around and charged at the Lich Dragon. These undead were controlled by the Lich's undead towers, and now Chu Tian had taken control of the Lich's undead towers. The Lich Dragon had lost control of the undead army. Clark, Yoda, and Dolores all revealed looks of shock. What did taking control from the Lich's hands mean? Not only did it require strength, it wasn't enough for Chu Tian to control the altar. He also needed to have higher attainments in the death domain than the Lich. The Lich Dragon gave an angry roar and gave up on the heavily injured green dragon. Its large body flew into the sky and shattered hundreds of skeletons. It charged at Chu Tian on the altar, but when it got close to the altar, the Lich Dragon hit a giant gray barrier and bounced back. Chu Tian gave a laugh. You've worked hard to gather this energy. If you fought it safely, you would have won. But you gave up the altar to protect the undead towers. This is putting the cart before the horse and making a big mistake. It seems like becoming a Lich did not make your brain any smarter. Now we can properly play around. Chu Tian completely controlled the altar. The altar was equivalent to a controller, or it could be said to be an encrypted controller. All the energy in the undead towers was controlled by the altar. The Lich was too confident and did not think that other than him, there was no one else who could control the altar. Now he was paying the price for his mistake. A few minutes ago, the ruler of this basin was the Lich. At this moment, the ruler had become Chu Tian. Chapter 435. Necromancy was one of the rare attributes. There were very few cultivators with innate necromancy talent on the continent, and there were even fewer top scholars in this field. The Lich was one of the best and had the qualifications to become an undead sage, so he had the qualifications to be arrogant and confident. This array was dug out from the ruins, and the Lich had studied it for a long time before putting it into practice. How could an outsider see through it with a single glance? It was because he was too confident or because he was too rational. The Lich left the altar to stop Chu Tian from destroying the undead towers. Who would have thought that it would backfire? Like this, even if he fused with the bone dragon, the Lich's advantage would be gone. The Lich dragon knew that controlling the altar meant controlling everything in the valley. All the power gathered in this place would be controlled by Chu Tian, and when Chu Tian used this power, he would become an invincible existence. The Lich Dragon could only hope that Chu Tian could kill him when he had just started controlling the altar, so he still had a chance to make a comeback. The Lich Dragon condensed a large amount of blue and green flames that turned into a wave of flames that shot towards the altar. However, when the altar was attacked, it was blocked by a thick undead energy. Even with the Lich Dragon's power, it could not break through. He was disappointed. Chu Tian was already in complete control of the situation. Chu Tian. While controlling the array, he shouted, "Do you not know how strong this altar's control is? Just surrender." The Lich Dragon of course did not surrender. Its body was filled with blue flames that suddenly came out of its skeleton and exploded like fireworks. There were countless blue lights that were like tentacles that fell onto the surrounding undead towers, connecting all of them together. Chu Tian was a bit stunned. This fellow really did have some skills. Connecting itself to the undead tower, even if the altar's control was taken away, the Lich Dragon could still absorb energy from the undead tower. After all, the undead tower was personally made by the Lich, so he was very familiar with the structure of it. In just a few seconds, Chen Xiaobei was already dead. The flames in the Lich Dragon's body became more than 10 times stronger. The blue and green flames flowed out of its body like crystals, forming a solid shell on the surface of its body. This terrifying skeleton dragon actually turned into a giant dragon carved out of crystal in an extremely short amount of time. Everyone's expression changed drastically. The Lich Dragon could actually do this? If it was like this, even if Chu Tian controlled the altar, he wouldn't be able to defeat the Lich Dragon. The Lich Dragon relied on the power of the undead towers, and its strength was hard to imagine. Chu Tian was too weak. He had no way of defeating the Lich Dragon. Roar! The almost solidified flame energy on the Lich Dragon's body continued to condense, turning from blue to dark blue before gradually turning gray. This was already an undead monster that had never been heard of before. The skeletons under the Lich Dragon were shaken by this roar and fell down like harvested wheat. The soul flames in their skulls were scattered, and they were instantly killed by this aura. But at this time, the death energy that the Lich had been pouring into the sky over the past few days condensed back bit by bit. Like a giant bolt of lightning, it suddenly fell down on the altar that Chu Tian was on. The sky collapsed. The sky collapsed. It was like a large hole had been opened in the sky and countless streams of ash-black energy wildly poured down like a waterfall. The energy that the Lich had prepared to destroy Green City in a single blow had been completely withdrawn at this moment. It completely surrounded the altar and turned into a black ocean. Quickly run. When everyone saw the black waves rushing towards them, they cried out in alarm. This was not something they could help with. If they were to be engulfed by the sea of death, they would turn into undead monsters in an instant. Everyone quickly retreated from the area. When they looked back, the entire basin was pitch black like a large bowl of black liquid. Everything had already been submerged, and no one knew what was happening inside. At this time, a crazy roar resounded in the Black Sea. An undead dragon, whose entire body was grayish-black, as if made of crystal, flapped his huge wings and soared into the sky. His whole body was surrounded by the aura of countless vengeful spirits. He opened his huge mouth, and the surrounding energy quickly gathered towards him. In just an instant, a black energy ball with a diameter of 3 to 4 meters was formed. The black energy ball was still wildly expanding with countless bolts of lightning surrounding it. The might of this attack was not inferior to the attack from the Lich's undead tower. Clark's face sunk. With this monster's strength, perhaps even a spirit transformation cultivator would find it hard to deal with it. I think the city lord is in danger. Chu Tian had already released the energy to deal with Green City, so Green City was completely safe now. But with this terrifying undead dragon here, wouldn't Green City find it hard to live in peace? After several generations of gnome experts, there were no spirit transformation cultivators guarding them. If they met this kind of attack, perhaps they would suffer heavy losses. Right now only Chu Tian had a way to deal with these undead monsters. If Chu Tian lost and was killed by the Lich Dragon, it would be hard for Green City to avoid a calamity. Clark and the gnomes had no choice but to admit a fact. The human they had always looked down on, the human they were not willing to accept, was actually an important person supporting the survival of Green City. He had basically become Green City's only hope. The Lich Dragon flapped its wings and the black hole-like energy ball flew into the center of the basin. Wherever it went, space trembled and the momentum was earth-shattering. It was very shocking to hear. At this time, a giant black sword flew into the sky and cut the energy ball in half. The black ocean quickly gathered in the center and finally formed an incomparably large figure. He looked like a 10-eyed demon god that could support the heavens and earth. 9 of his eyes were closed and only a single ash-black eye was open. He was incomparably large and had a pair of wings on his back. He looked down on all living beings and he held a giant black sword in his hand, just like a war god from the underworld. What is this? When things developed to this point, everything had already surpassed one's imagination. The Lich Dragon could feel that this powerful demon god monster was actually created by Chu Tian using the power of the array and the undead energy. As for how he did it, the Lich Dragon did not know. Even with his 2,000 years of knowledge, he had never heard of such a terrifying and powerful cultivation technique in this world. Not to mention him. Even the most intelligent person in the world would not know that this cultivation technique was called the Demon and God 9 transformations. The demon god gave a low angry roar and slowly raised its giant sword. The black aura in the surroundings all surged towards the giant sword dragon, finally turning into flames that soared into the sky. Chu Tian could not maintain this state for long. Therefore he gathered all of them together to decide victory. The solidified crystals on the Lich Dragon's body began to boil again, and the flames engulfed its entire body, making it look like it had doubled in size. It looked like a black phoenix that came out of the underworld, directly using its burning body to release an earth-shattering attack. The demon god raised its giant sword glow and slammed it down on the black phoenix's body. The energy released this time created a shockwave that created quite a large storm for several dozen kilometers. Break for me! The god-demon sword's destructive power and boundless deathly energy fused together, instantly exploding forth with astonishing power. The god-demon sword sliced through the black phoenix's head, and by the time the blade came out from its tail, the god-demon sword had reached its limit and exploded. Chu Tian was sent flying and heavily fell to the ground. At this moment, his body was injured both inside and out. Regardless of whether it was his spirit or strength, he was severely overdrawn. He would probably need at least 10 days to half a month to recover. But it didn't matter. The Lich Dragon was cut in half and all of its energy dissipated. The dragon skeleton that was pieced together by the secret death technique fell apart and large amounts of fragments spread over several miles. The death energy in the death basin completely dissipated. Everything returned to normal in a short period of time. It's over? It's all over? This shocking battle made those who personally witnessed it unable to recover for a long time. The little fox was wildly swallowing the death energy in the death basin and cleaning up the aftermath. After around 2 hours, the Green City army rushed over. When they saw the messy basin, they were all stunned. This was a battle that changed the landscape. This kind of battle was something even peak true spirit cultivators could not do. Finally, the immobile Chu Tian was carried out. Although the side effects were large, Chu Tian's consciousness was still clear. He did not waste words and just ordered Clark, "Immediately send people to seal off the basin, no one is allowed to enter." Clark did not dare underestimate Chu Tian at all. "Understood, Sir City Lord." Not long after Chu Tian was sent back to Green City, everyone in Green City knew of Chu Tian's bravery. Chu Tian's strength alone had saved the entire Green City. He was the savior of the Green religion and the gnomes, which created a large response in Green City. Everything that followed was logical. On the third day, the Green religion's gnome elders announced to the entire city that the acting city lord Chu Tian had officially become the sole city lord of Green City. The entire Green City had to listen to Chu Tian's orders. Although there were many twists and turns and many changes, he finally sat on the city lord's throne. The first thing Chu Tian announced was a name change. To welcome a new beginning for Green City, and to represent that Chu Tian had officially become the city lord, Green City could no longer be called Green City, it would change its name. From today onwards, the Forest of Chaos Green City would forever become a thing of the past. This city would be renamed to Miracle City, Miracle City. This was a city in the center of the Forest of Chaos. Although it had an outstanding location, it was not a very remarkable city, and it was not a very strong city. Miracle City was still a mess. This moment would inevitably be recorded in history. Chapter 436. There were too many messes in Miracle City. Although the internal problems had been solved, the external threats were still very serious. The famine caused by the shamans had not been solved yet, the undead had polluted the southern forests, and Miracle City's environment was very special. Being too weak at this moment, it was hard to avoid conflicts with the surrounding large powers. Adding in the change of ruler, the top and bottom needed to work together, so they were in a period of chaos. The merchants in the city had all left and Miracle City had lost their source of income. Dolores had been reporting to Chu Tian's sickbed for an entire hour, and she still hadn't finished. "Enough, enough, don't say any more." Chu Tian sat up. Although he had recovered from 5-6 days of resting in bed, Chu Tian was still in a weak state. "I will find helpers to clean up this mess. You don't need to report everything to me. Where is Clark? Quickly call him over." Dolores was speechless. How could a city lord act like this? Clark came to the city lord's fort and immediately cupped his hands to Chu Tian as he said, reporting to the city lord, as expected, "We found that the basin is connected to a deep underground space. There are all kinds of ancient creature skeletons and there are countless undead monsters wandering around. However, we still don't know why there is such a strong death energy. Because the environment inside is too dangerous, the scouts don't dare enter." Chu Tian rubbed his chin and thought. He thought of a possibility, but he couldn't confirm it for now. "Don't worry about it for now, I'll find time to personally take a look." Clark came over holding a black crystal in his hand. "When we were collecting the Lich Dragon's remains, we found this in the Lich Dragon's skull. This seems to be the Lich's soul flame. Should we destroy it?" In order to resist the little fox's swallowing ability, the Lich had used a secret technique to seal its soul flame. It was because of this that the soul flame wasn't destroyed in the end. Chu Tian took the crystal in his hand. "A 2,000-year-old Lich's soul flame, this is a very precious thing. It would be a pity to destroy it, I have other uses for it." The soul flame was the heart and the brain of an undead. Most of the undead's power was sealed in their soul fire. The memories and thinking abilities of the intelligent undead were also produced by the fluctuations of their soul fire. Therefore, for undead creatures, the soul fire was a very important part. They could abandon any part of their body, but the soul fire was indispensable. The Lich's soul fire was damaged to a certain extent, and the Lich's independent consciousness should have been completely dispersed. This damaged soul fire was like a living creature whose brain had been damaged and turned into a vegetable. Although it had lost the ability to think independently, Chu Tian believed that if he could give it some proper stimulation, this soul fire would still be able to continue burning and operating. None of this was important. Chu Tian asked the question he was most concerned about: "How's the matter I asked you to do?" Although space attribute crystals are very rare, the gnomes have some in stock. We have already completed the work according to the blueprints and methods provided by the City Lord. Clark hesitated for a moment before asking, "Space attribute materials are rare, but there aren't many places where they can be used. We don't know why the City Lord wanted to build that strange tower." There weren't many places where spatial attribute materials could be used. It was mainly in the creation of storage equipment. The research on spatial energy in this era was too limited, but even if it was like this, spatial attribute materials were still an expensive and rare material. Chu Tian had given Clark a blueprint 3 days ago and had Clark bring the gnomes to complete the things on the blueprint. This time, he had used most of the spatial attribute materials in Green City's stock, which made the gnomes feel very pained. No rush. When Chu Tian heard that it was finished, his mood immediately became very good. "Let's go, I'll bring you to have a look." In a small valley in the center of Miracle City, there was a 4-meter-tall steeple being built. There was a giant disk beside the steeple that was embedded with large amounts of space attribute crystals. Chu Tian carefully inspected it and finally made sure that there were no mistakes before carefully taking out the eye of the star. The eye of the star had been carefully polished, so it was only 2/3 of its original size. When the eye of the star was placed in the center of the steeple, it immediately connected to the steeple. An energy quickly filled the entire steeple and disk, instantly activating this strange thing. A starlight was released from the top of the steeple, and the aura of spatial energy filled the surroundings. The gnomes were a bit stunned. Spatial energy was one of the most mysterious and elusive energies in the world, but Chu Tian could arrange it in a stable and orderly manner. This should be fine. Chu Tian took out the communication device to contact Oldman's small town. The people on the other side had been waiting for a long time, so Chu Tian didn't waste words and directly said, "You can come over now." Chu Tian hung up the communication device and made a retreating gesture. No one knew what Chu Tian was doing, but he wouldn't do something meaningless. Clark and Dolores had personally seen Chu Tian place the eye of the star in the steeple, so they remembered how important the eye of the star was to Chu Tian. This also meant that the steeple did not have a normal ability. At this time, the steeple suddenly lit up. The space crystals began to release energy. Everyone felt like the ground was being affected by some kind of energy as it began to slightly tremble. There was a dazzling flash of light, and on the disk beside the steeple, large amounts of human figures appeared. Chu Tian. Before the light disappeared, a surprised and excited voice sounded in Chu Tian's ears. There was a soft and boneless body that jumped into his embrace, giving him a large hug. If it wasn't Yingying, who else could it be? Chu Tian picked up Yingying. "How is it? I didn't lie to you, right? It really is mysterious." Meng Yingying's face turned a bit red and she immediately left his embrace. "How did you do it?" "We were clearly in Oldman's small town, but when we opened the scroll, we were instantly brought here. This is the effect of the transport tower." Chu Tian proudly looked at his work and said, "Miracle City has the first transport tower on the continent. Whether it is the ends of the earth or any corner of the world, as long as you use the spatial transportation technology, you can instantly arrive in our miracle city. The scroll I gave you using the space warehouse was actually made from the eye of the star fragment and space crystal powder. It has the spatial coordinates of Miracle City's transport tower recorded on it, so it can complete a group transport. It wasn't just Meng Yingying that was sent over this time. Meng Qingwu, Nangong Yun, Qin Bingyu, Vivian, and most of the main members of Miracle Commerce had all arrived. Ha ha, young Miss Vivian, Nangong, long time no see. Chu Tian found several small abysses. Lulu, you're here too? That's great. The little flower fairy Lulu had brought her sisters here. Her face was filled with surprise at this moment. Meng Qingwu, Nangong Yun, and Chen Bingyu didn't react at all. They couldn't understand no matter how they thought about it. They had been in Oldman's small town a moment ago, but they had suddenly come to Miracle City in the blink of an eye. The two places were separated by tens of thousands of miles. They actually crossed it in the blink of an eye. This was simply a miracle. The most shocked was Vivian. Vivian herself was a spatial talent. Her maximum teleportation distance was not more than a few hundred miles, because the further the distance, the harder it was to lock onto space. She had never heard of anyone in this world who could cross a distance of tens of thousands of miles in one go. I know you have many questions you want to ask, but now isn't the time. Let me introduce you. Chu Tian turned to the people who were like blocks of wood and said, "This is the gnome Great Elder Clark. This is the Fox Clan's demonic god Priest Dolores, and this is—" Clark's face was filled with excitement. "Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Then who are these people?" "This beautiful and noble human young miss, who has both beauty and intelligence, is the vice chairman of Miracle Commerce and also Miracle City's vice city lord." Chu Tian then pointed at the petite Vivian on the side and said, "This elven young miss has an even bigger background. She is the Eternal Forest's elven king's daughter Vivian, and will be Miracle City's vice city lord from now on." Meng Qingwu and Vivian, they were the two vice city lords appointed by the elven king. Clark didn't know who Meng Qingwu was, but he had heard of Vivian. This was the elven king's most talented daughter, and he felt it was very strange at the time. Why didn't the elven king directly give his daughter the position of city lord and instead gave a nameless human such an important position? Although Vivian wasn't considered strong right now, she was still stronger than this human, right? Not to mention that she was the elven king's daughter. If Vivian was in the city, the other powers would have to consider if they could deal with the elven king's revenge, if they wanted to. Of course. Now Clark understood. After seeing Chu Tian's abilities and methods, the gnomes no longer looked down on this seemingly young but incomparably powerful human. They had complete trust in the elven king's ability to judge people. "It's not convenient to talk here, let's go to the city lord's main hall." The two sides naturally needed some time to get used to each other. Although Chu Tian had already become the city lord, the gnomes were still the main power of Miracle City. Chu Tian would need the gnomes' resources and manpower for a long time, so there were some things that needed to be clearly explained. At the very least, Chu Tian wanted the gnomes to know what Miracle Commerce did. "Wah, boss, it can't be!" Nangong Yun shouted while flying on the griffin. "Our city is too big, I've never seen a city like this before. It can fit several dozen southern summer imperial cities together." Meng Yingying was also very shocked by Miracle City's scenery. Although there was still a faint undead aura in the air, it did not stop her from enjoying the beautiful scenery of the city. The surrounding mountains were natural walls and barriers, while the interior was vast and incomparably beautiful. There were plains, valleys, mountain ranges, and lake. This was truly a rare treasure land. Too big. Only there were too few people. If it wasn't for the scattered castles and settlements, everyone would have thought they had come to a paradise surrounded by mountains. Who would have thought that this was a city? Meng Qingwu was very excited. Miracle Commerce had developed for over a year, and this was the first time they had an official territory. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.